I lived like a stray dog in this broken world. Here, the weak are stripped of everything, their wealth, their status, even their lives. There are no second chances. If you die, it simply means you were too weak to survive. 100 years ago, a blinding ray of light descended from the heavens. It devoured everything. Forests, oceans, cities, nothing was spared. The vibrant blue planet that once overflowed with life was reduced to a silent, endless desert. A graveyard for all living things. The few who survived could only cling to life by hiding within massive fortresses, like insects burrowing into the dirt. And in that world, there was a boy named Zeon. One day, as the bus rattled across the barren wasteland, Zeon stared out at the empty horizon and muttered under his breath, "If you're going to destroy everything, then destroy it all. Why leave behind trash like us? Crawling like bugs?" Crack! Without warning, a brutal punch slammed into his face. His head whipped to the side, crashing hard against the metal wall of the bus. Laughter followed. "Oops. My hand slipped," a man said mockingly, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Sorry about that. I was just having a little fun." He waved lazily, as if nothing had happened. "Come on, tell me your name. I'll apologize properly." Slowly, Zeon lifted his head. His eyes were cold. Empty. "Zeon." For a moment, there was silence. Then the man burst out laughing. "Zeon? What kind of name is that?" He sneered. "What, couldn't decide which of your dads to take it from?" The bus erupted in laughter. Every voice, every smirk, it all pressed down on him. Zeon bit down on his lip until it nearly bled, forcing the rage inside him to stay buried. He said nothing. But his silence only made it worse. "Look at him," the man mocked, his voice dripping with contempt. "He's pissed." His grin widened. "And yet, he can't do a damn thing about it." The man slid into the seat beside Zeon and casually draped an arm over his shoulder. "Relax," he said with a laugh. "We're all in the same boat here. We should get along, right?" Zeon didn't respond. Instead, his thoughts turned cold. Everyone riding this bus to the mines has one thing in common. Not a single one of them is actually a miner. The man tilted his head, still smiling. "So, what were you doing when they caught you?" Before he could finish, Zeon shoved his hand off his shoulder. His gaze sharpened. "They're either criminals or fugitives. Usually one of the two. Assault? Fraud, if I had to guess, as thud." Zeon's fist shot forward without warning, smashing straight into the man's face. The impact sent him crashing into the aisle of the bus. "All wrong. Dumbass." Zeon rose to his feet, stepping forward with cold intent. "You want me to tell you?" he said quietly. "Murder." He pulled his fist back, ready to strike again. "Strictly speaking, I didn't kill a person," he continued, his voice calm but chilling. "In Neo's soul, only those with power are considered people. So what's the big deal if one more piece of trash gets thrown into the dump? A filthy rat tried to steal my stuff. And died on his own." His eyes darkened. "But who knew? It was someone's pet?" The memory surfaced like a nightmare. The dying man's voice, "My brother. Li Jirong. You know him? You're dead. You idiot. Li Jirong." The name alone made Zeon's face pale. Cold sweat formed on his skin. "If the powerful are called people, then awakeners are gods among them, and I killed a god's pet." Rumors spread quickly. Li Jirong was looking for him. And before Zeon even realized it, he had already fled, clinging to survival, crawling onto a bus bound for the mines. "Hey!" A voice snapped him back to reality. Zeon's eyes widened. Blood splattered across his face. His fist had connected. But the man was still standing, still smiling. "Done?" the man asked, laughing softly. Zeon's expression twisted. "What?" Pain shot through his hand. "Why is my hand injured? No way." Before he could react, the man's grip clamped down on Zeon's face. Crash! With overwhelming force, he hurled Zeon across the bus. Zeon's body slammed violently into the metal interior, a cry of pain escaping his lips. The man stretched his arms casually, as if warming up. "You should have said so earlier," he said with a grin. "Big bro came here for the same reason too." He rolled his shoulders, his voice turning colder. "I might have let it slide. He was my little brother. I even doted on him, you know?" His smile twisted. "But you went too far." Zeon lay there, barely able to move, his mind racing in terror. "Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how I managed to escape the Awakeners and make it this far? And now, of all times." The man stepped forward slowly. "You need a little lesson from your big brother." As he spoke, a powerful energy began to surge around him. The air itself seemed to tremble, Awakening power. He laughed. Everyone agrees, right? An awakener. An awakener. The moment the energy flared, panic spread through the bus like wildfire. Then crash. The entire bus shook violently, as if something massive had slammed into it. People screamed as their bodies were thrown off balance, crashing into one another, struggling to hold on. What the hell? A man with a badly injured head shouted angrily, clutching his wound as blood seeped through his fingers. Hey! Can't you drive straight? But the driver didn't respond. He sat frozen in his seat, his hands trembling on the wheel. His voice came out in a whisper, filled with terror. It's there. The injured man gritted his teeth. What the hell are you talking about? But then, his eyes shifted forward and froze. The driver's lips trembled, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't supposed to happen. He muttered. I told them. It wasn't supposed to. We weren't going to the mines. The injured man's anger faltered. What are you babbling about? The driver's mouth opened, his voice breaking as fear completely consumed him. We're being eaten. The ground beneath them split apart. A colossal mouth, made of nothing but shifting sand and jagged, crushing force, opened wide beneath the bus. A sand monster. A sandworm. Before anyone could react, the bus plunged downward. Swallowed whole. Aha! Screams filled the air as the bus was dragged deeper. Sand pouring in from every direction. People clawed at anything they could grab, but it was useless. They slammed into each other, crushed by the violent motion, unable to keep their footing. Chaos. Pure chaos. Zeon was thrown against the floor, barely managing to lift his head as the world around him collapsed. Sand poured in. The darkness closed in, and still. He struggled. Looking back. It was always like this. The same situation. Repeating itself, in Neo's soul. When I crossed paths with an awakener. And now. Even being eaten by a sandworm. A bitter smile formed on his lips. There's nothing special about it. This is that kind of world. A world where the strong take everything. And the weak lose everything. His fingers tightened weakly against the ground. So if I die like this, it's only natural. Because I'm weak. The sandworm's jaws began to close. Light disappeared. Everything turned dark. What a boring, predictable story. So cliché. It could make anyone yawn. His vision blurred. Still, I can't help but imagine it. If I had been just a little stronger, would I have survived? The entire area was dark inside the sandworm. Only one arm remained outside, barely visible above the shifting sand. Suddenly that arm twitched, but it was badly injured, twisted, and nearly broken. Without warning, the sand churned again, dragging the remaining arm deeper inside. Zeon's eyes shot open. He gasped sharply, breathing heavily as he lay buried in the sand. Inside the sandworm, it was almost impossible to breathe. His chest tightened as if all the oxygen had been drained from his body. Tears welled in his eyes as his body felt completely paralyzed. At that moment, visions flooded his mind. He saw countless countries collapsing into the sand, everything being swallowed and destroyed. His eyes widened wildly as those memories played before him. A burning light ignited within his gaze, growing brighter with each passing second. Elsewhere, the sand devoured everything in its path. Nothing was left behind. Even the sky seemed to fall, buried beneath endless waves of sand. The entire world, every great place, was covered and erased. As Zeon watched, the light in his eyes intensified, burning with rising fury. Then he saw something familiar, one place from his memories collapsing before him. Fear spread across his face, sweat dripping down as the reality of it all struck him. The whole world, reduced to nothing but sand. Suddenly, the light in his eyes flared brighter than ever. In that instant, it felt as if the entire world was being absorbed into him. He awakened. Sand Blaster! He shouted. With a powerful thrust of his hand, he released a massive wave of energy, blasting through the sandworm's body. The attack tore open a hole, just enough for him to grab onto and pull himself free, gasping desperately for air. His body was covered in the creature's blood as he struggled to stand. In this cursed world, he thought, where everything has turned to sand. No matter what. Suddenly, the massive sandworm roared in fury. It opened its enormous mouth once again, preparing to swallow him whole. And it lunged toward Zeon. Zeon closed his eyes and thought, I can feel this pulsing clearly. Every single cell in my body is surging. He slowly opened his eyes and clenched his fist. While staring at his hand, he muttered, Is this awakening? Suddenly, the sandworm charged toward Zeon in a fit of rage, opening its massive mouth wide. Zeon remained standing in place as sand swirled around him. In an instant, The giant sandworm rushed forward, ready to swallow him whole. Zeon steadied his feet in the sand, grabbed his right arm with his left hand, and shouted, "All right. Bring it on." But at that very moment, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Captain Jang Yongbyum. Placing a hand on Zeon's head while staring at the giant sandworm, he calmly said, "As a test subject, you're in the way." Zeon's eyes widened in shock before he could even react. Captain Jang Yongbyum casually pushed Zeon aside, sending him flying through the air. Zeon crashed hard onto the sand and rolled across the ground. Grinding his teeth from the impact, he coughed as sand filled his mouth. What the hell? Who is that guy? When did he even get so close? Zeon froze again as he watched the unbelievable scene unfold before him. The captain's massive sword sliced deep into the sandworm, causing blood to burst everywhere. Standing before the enormous creature with blood splattered across his body, Jang Yongbyum muttered, "What the hell did you eat to get so damn tall? Being up this high is scary. So let's go back down." He then raised his foot high into the air and slammed it downward onto the sword. Boom! The impact was so powerful that the giant sandworm was crushed straight into the ground. Sand exploded everywhere from the shockwave as blood sprayed across the battlefield. Zeon shielded himself with his arms, gritting his teeth in disbelief. This is insane. He took down a sandworm that easily? So this is an awakener. Meanwhile, Jang Yongbyum pulled his sword free from the corpse of the giant sandworm and sighed. "Ah. It's stuck in there damn tight." Zeon continued staring at him in shock. "I've never seen an awakener like this before." Suddenly, a girl appeared beside him. It was Giselle. With a cheerful smile, she looked toward the captain and proudly said, "Jang Yongbyum is our captain." Zeon quickly turned toward her in surprise. "What?" Giselle excitedly shouted, "That's our captain for you. Isn't this the fastest he's ever taken one down?" Zeon's eyes widened again. When did she get here? She's a lot stronger than she looks. Wait a second. Why is my arm freezing up? Panicking, Zeon tried to move the hand she had touched. At the same time, Jang Yongbyum rested his massive sword on his shoulder and casually said, "A sandworm isn't exactly a tough opponent anyway. Also, Giselle." Giselle laughed. "Yep." The captain narrowed his eyes and silently gave her a signal. Still smiling, Giselle suddenly grabbed Zeon's arm. Zeon gritted his teeth and struggled to break free. "Seriously?" Jang Yongbyum let out a deep breath while Giselle cheerfully saluted him. Then, in one swift motion, she kicked Zeon into the air, slammed him to the ground, and twisted his arm behind his back. "Ack!" Zeon cried out in pain. Giselle rolled up the bandages on his arm and said, "Alright, let's see what this guy's grade and ability are. Drumroll, please." But then her expression changed in surprise. "Captain, this guy isn't an awakener." Zeon's body stiffened in shock. "What? What kind of bullshit is that?" Giselle twisted his arm even harder and shouted toward the captain, "Look! He doesn't have a rank insignia. Crazy. My arm!" Zeon yelled in pain. Jang Yongbyum stared at Zeon with narrowed eyes. "He doesn't have a rank insignia. Are you blind? There's no way an awakener wouldn't have one." Suddenly, one of the members banged on the army van and shouted, "What are you all dawdling for? I told you the sun is setting. Hurry up." Meanwhile, Giselle released Zeon and stood back on her feet before pointing her thumb toward him. "Captain, then what should we do with him? He'll die if we just leave him here." "Poor guy." Zeon held onto his aching arm while glaring at her. "You practically ripped my arm off." Captain Jang Yongbyum looked at Zeon with curiosity. Zeon nervously shifted his gaze toward the captain. After a brief moment, Jang Yongbyum turned away, waved his hand casually, and said, "Put him in the dodge." He was probably heading toward the mine anyway. Hearing that, Giselle's face lit up with excitement. "Yes, sir." Using both hands effortlessly, she picked Zeon up and carried him while following behind the captain. As the sun slowly began to set, the army van started moving forward. Inside the dodge, the man with glasses slammed his hands against the steering wheel and shouted, "I mean, why do you always run off on your own? I told you already. Sunset. The sun is setting. Don't pretend you can't hear me." Captain Jang Yongbyum remained completely silent, looking slightly awkward. Meanwhile, Giselle continued laughing, while the large man sitting nearby simply stared forward quietly. After a while, the captain calmly asked, "How much farther until the mine?" The man with glasses immediately shouted back again, "Don't change the subject. If the sun goes down while we're out here like this." At the back of the van, Zeon lay tied up tightly with ropes. As the rough vehicle shook violently across the desert, he sighed inwardly. What a smooth ride. Just like every single time. His eyes noticed the sand falling around him. As the grains drifted down in front of his face, Zeon quickly sat up and crossed his legs. Looking down at the ropes tied around his arms, he muttered, seeing how the sand moves according to my will. I've definitely awakened an ability, but… He glanced at his arm and whispered, why did they say they couldn't see my rank insignia? After thinking for a moment, his eyes narrowed. Now that I think about it, the color is different too. Orange. No, it's the same color as sand. Curious, Zeon recalled what he knew about awakeners. The color of a rank insignia changes depending on the awakener's type. Magic types are blue. Martial types are red. They say there are occasionally awakeners with other types, but… He slowly placed his bound hands onto the sand and focused. The sand immediately began flowing around his arms before spreading across his body like a living wave. Zeon stared at it in amazement. An ability that manipulates sand. I've never even heard of something like this before. Closing his eyes, he calmly muttered, my rank insignia showed F rank, the lowest grade. But I can feel it. This ability has boundless potential, just like the desert itself. A faint smirk appeared on his face. As he manipulated the sand in his hand, twisting it into the shape of a circle, he quietly said, I'll bide my time. Until this power becomes completely mine. I'll hide it and endure until the right moment comes. Then, with a dark smile, he created different shapes out of the sand and thought, the entire desert. No, this whole world will become my personal stage. The scene then shifted to the mana crystal mine. After arriving at the checkpoint, Zeon looked around carefully and whispered, so this is the mana crystal mine. There's even a checkpoint. So far, it actually looks pretty normal. Behind him, Captain Jang Yongbiem was busy speaking with the checkpoint guards, who looked visibly irritated. A moment later, one of the guards pointed at Zeon and shouted, Hey! You! Follow me! Zeon raised the hands that were still tied with rope and said, You still haven't untied these yet. The guard glared at him. Keep talking and I'll tie your mouth shut too. Okay. Zeon replied quietly before following behind him. Meanwhile, Captain Jang Yongbiem and Giselle watched him leave. Folding his arms, the captain muttered thoughtfully, It really is strange. Giselle stretched her arms lazily and asked, Because he survived all by himself? Don't worry about it. It was probably just a coincidence. But Jang Yongbiem narrowed his eyes. No, it wasn't a coincidence. His mind flashed back to the hole he had seen in the giant sandworm's body earlier. After a brief silence, he quietly said, At the very least, I should have asked for his name. A faint smile appeared on his face. I have a feeling we'll be seeing that kid again someday. Zeon, as he looked around, he realized there was actually an entire city hidden within the mine. It looked far more normal than he had expected. Even Zeon admitted that he thought it would only be a collection of dark tunnels, yet people were actually living there. The guard beside him once again told him to stay quiet until the supervisor arrived. And while using his gun shot, he untied Zeon's hands. Zeon frowned and asked if they were really planning to leave him there like that. The guard coldly replied by asking if Zeon wanted a bullet in his head before he left. Zeon quickly answered no, but questioned how the man could be so sure he would not try anything. The guard simply shrugged and told him to do whatever he wanted, because it was not as if he could accomplish anything anyway. After the guard walked away, Zeon cursed under his breath. Since he had time to look around and was beginning to feel hungry, he decided to search for a place to eat. Eventually, he noticed a small food stand run by an old man. While sitting there, his eyes noticed something. It hung a poster speaking about labor and how they were helping illuminate Neo's soul. The old man chuckled and asked if it sounded grand. He claimed the slogan was so accurate that it was almost funny because Neo's soul's true energy source was not mana crystals at all. Confused, Zeon asked what he means. If it was not mana crystals, then what else could it possibly be? The old man pointed directly at Zeon. It's people like you, he said. Rats who obey orders without question. And whenever their numbers decrease, more arrive to replace them. What better energy source could there be? Zeon narrowed his eyes and commented that the old man seemed to know quite a lot despite only meeting him moments ago. Judging by his age, Zeon joked that most of the old man's friends were probably already dead. The old man merely laughed and replied that when someone reached his age, they naturally became interested in everything. Then he casually asked Zeon what it felt like inside the sandworm, and whether it resembled returning to his mother's womb. Zeon was shocked and asked if the rumors had already spread that quickly. The old man called him foolish and warned him that he would soon wish he had simply ended up as sandworm remains because this place was far from safe. Zeon asked what he was talking about. He had only come there to make money. The old man scoffed at him before pointing towards several boxes stacked nearby. Zeon dismissed them as trash, but the old man explained that each item had been collected from people who once came there dreaming of a better future. According to him, everyone who arrived at the mine tried to avoid entering it at first because they believed they would die inside. They sold everything they owned just to survive a little longer, some even selling themselves. Yet in the end, none of it mattered. Everything slipped through their fingers until they finally accepted being swallowed by the mine. The old man quietly stated that people claimed a person left behind their name after death, but trash left behind nothing except more trash. He admitted that he was curious about what kind of trash Zeon would leave behind. Annoyed, Zeon tossed the meat skewer back onto the table and demanded to know the price. 10 sol, the old man replied calmly. Zeon stared at him in disbelief and asked if he had sprinkled gold over it. The old man answered that everything in the mine was precious and that even the skewer itself was worth 9 sol. Zeon argued that the meat must have been cheap and accused the old man of trying to scam him simply because he was new. There was no way anyone would pay that much. The atmosphere immediately changed. The people nearby slowly drew their weapons and surrounded him. Zeon nervously apologized, insisting he simply could not pay that amount. Zeon, feeling strange, appears on his behind. The lights suddenly went out. The old man calmly asked if Zeon did not find it strange that an old man like him could openly run a business in such a dangerous place. As blades pointed toward him, the old man smirked and said, "Now then. What are you going to do now?" Zeon slammed his hand against the table and begged everyone to calm down. He insisted they could settle things peacefully with words. The old man smiled and told him not to worry. He was not heartless. Instead of money, Zeon could simply trade the mana crystal hidden in his pocket. Zeon was stunned that rumors about the crystal had already spread as well. The old man demanded he hand it over, claiming he would even offer a fair price for it. Furious, Zeon refused and declared that the old man had no idea what he had gone through to protect it. One of the men suddenly grabbed Zeon by the head and slammed his face against the table. Blood splattered everywhere. The man angrily demanded to know why the old man was wasting time talking to a brat like him. For a brief moment, Zeon imagined unleashing his sand blaster ability, and then cut through the man's arm, even tearing everyone apart in a violent storm of sand and blood killed everyone there, as blood spread all around. But it was only a fantasy. In reality, he remained frozen in place with blood dripping from his nose. The old man noticed his blank expression and asked if he had just experienced a nightmare. Realizing he had no choice, Zeon finally threw the crystal onto the table. The old man examined it carefully and estimated its value at around 100 sol. Zeon immediately protested, insisting it was worth at least 300. The old man calmly replied that everything inside the mine was valued differently. Perhaps Zeon truly should have remained inside the sandworm after all. Grinding his teeth in frustration, Zeon smashed his head into the table. Zeon resisted the urge to attack him, but control his emotions. As blood dropping on his forehead, instead, he begged for proper change. The old man agreed and warned him to guard his money carefully since thieves and pickpockets were everywhere. While the deal done, the old man's subordinate proudly thumb up and left back to their works. The old man pointed as a bonus for their first transaction. He even allowed Zeon to choose one item from the pile of junk nearby. While searching through the objects, Zeon complained that everything looked worthless. The old man narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, what an amusing kid. That obsession with never taking a loss. And that stubborn vitality. It's been a long time since I've seen someone like him. While searching through the pile of items, Zeon asked, "Is there anything else?" Suddenly, something caught his attention. The old man explained, that was left behind by a caravan a long time ago. Zeon examined the item carefully before thinking, I doubt I'll find anything better even if I keep looking. Finally, he said, I'll take this. As he prepared to leave, Zeon lightly tapped the old man on the shoulder. The old man smiled and remarked, You really do take an interest in the most useless things. Zeon coldly nodded. Yeah. After walking a few steps forward, Zeon suddenly stopped and asked, Old man, what's your name? The old man laughed loudly before shouting back, It's Klexi. Zeon turned around and stared at him for a moment. Old man Klexi. Let's never cross paths again. As they walked in opposite directions, Klexi folded his hands behind his back and laughed. We'll see about that, kid. While placing the hourglass in front of him, Zeon watched the sand slowly falling inside it. About 10 minutes until it all runs out. He muttered. Sitting alone in the miner's quarters, Zeon held the hourglass tightly in his hand. All right then. Inhale. Closing his eyes, he slowly breathed in and out, trying to steady himself. He focused carefully, attempting to use his power on the hourglass and move the sand inside it, but nothing happened. Frustrated, Zeon shoved the item back into his pocket and clenched his teeth. So it wasn't an item related to my awakening. Then he calmed himself and quietly muttered, I'm certain this was my first time seeing it. But I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. As if it had been prepared just for me. It felt familiar, like it was calling to me. Yet at the same time, completely new. What is this feeling? Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud kick. The supervisor stormed inside and shouted, Are you the new piece of shit that arrived today? Pointing at Zeon, he yelled again, Hey, bastard! Why the hell aren't you crawling your way to the mine? Does Bok Manho have to come all the way here just to get you? Zeon looked at him nervously before speaking. I'm not a bastard. I'm Zeon. You didn't even tell me where to. Before he could finish, a fist slammed into his face, sending him flying through the air. Shut your mouth. Bok Manho smashed Zeon into the ground and began kicking him violently. How dare you talk back to me? Do I look like a pushover to you? Do I? Zeon curled up, trying to shield himself with his arms while silently enduring the beating. Bok Manho continued yelling, an unawakened retard like you dares to run his mouth? Little shits like you just need to shut up and take your beatings. After finally stopping, Bok Manho glared down at him. If you understand, hurry up and follow me. Bruised and aching, Zeon slowly stood up while holding his injured arm and followed behind him. As he walked, he brushed his hair back with one hand and whispered quietly, "What a filthy temper. Bok Manho. I'll remember that. I'll make sure to kill you someday." At the entrance to Sector 3 mine, one of Bok Manho's subordinates greeted them. "Welcome back, sir." Bok Manho pointed at Zeon. "Give this little shit some equipment." "Yes, sir." Zeon stood silently as the subordinate handed him a helmet, safety gear, and a pickaxe. Bok Manho crossed his arms and said, "The cost of the equipment and food will be deducted from your daily wages. When you mine a mana crystal, bring it out immediately." "Got it?" Then he suddenly shouted, "Answer me." While putting on the safety gear, Zeon asked, "Is that it? How much is the daily wage?" Bok Manho sneered. "Even I shouldn't have to explain something that simple." Zeon looked at him nervously, but suddenly a pickaxe slammed into his helmet and shattered it. Pointing the pickaxe at Zeon, Bok Manho roared, "Do you need me to teach you how to use a damn pickaxe too? The cost of that helmet will be deducted from your wages, so remember it." Zeon bowed his head while grinding his teeth in anger. "That moron," he muttered quietly. The subordinate looked panicked after seeing the attack. Bok Manho rested the pickaxe on his shoulder and shouted, "Send this little shit to Tunnel 972. The subordinate hesitated nervously. "If it's Tunnel 972. We still haven't." Before he could finish, Bok Manho exploded in anger again. "Then are you gonna go instead? Huh? Are you going to do it? Answer me, bastard." The subordinate quickly grabbed Zeon by the arm. Alright, I understand. Let's just go." As they walked away, Zeon secretly stuck out his tongue toward Bok Manho to mock him. Bok Manho shouted from behind them, "Don't even think about crawling back out before you mine those mana crystals. I'll kill you for real if you do." Zeon muttered under his breath, "Piss off." "Yes, sir." The subordinate's eyes widened in shock. Bok Manho snarled, "I can hear you, punk." As they walked deeper through the tunnels, an eerie silence echoed around them. There were no other workers in sight. Sand continuously fell from above, and occasional openings in the tunnel allowed faint sunlight to filter in. Wearing their safety equipment, Zeon followed one of Bok Manho's subordinates. The subordinate spoke casually. "You're out of luck. To think you'd come on the very day Bok Manho lost everything gambling." Surprised, Zeon asked. "There's a gambling den here too?" The subordinate smiled as he pressed the elevator button. "Of course. Prostitution, booze, and even drugs. Things like that are exactly the same as in Neo Soul." As the elevator descended deeper underground, Zeon said, "Well, with idiots like Bok Manho around, business must be booming." The subordinate laughed while holding his pickaxe. "You're quite bold." Zeon glanced at the pickaxe and said, "Pickaxe duty, huh? To be honest, I have baby skin. I get hurt easily." The subordinate's hand trembled slightly as he replied, "You probably won't have to worry about getting hurt." Lowering his head, he continued in a quieter voice, "Because there hasn't been a single injured person there, not even one." The elevator suddenly stopped. "Oh, we're here," Zeon said. The doors opened, revealing a dark tunnel with sand drifting through the air. "So this is Tunnel 972. Stepping out while nervously gripping his pickaxe, Zeon asked, "I just need to mine some mana crystals and bring them back, right? I'll be..." Before he could finish, the subordinate called out from inside the elevator, "You won't be coming back." Zeon froze. "Over a dozen people have already disappeared here. I personally know 4 of them. Whether they died or not, nobody knows the reason." As the elevator began rising back up, the subordinate looked down at Zeon and said, "I'm sorry, and thank you, for going into a place no one else wanted to enter." Zeon stared at him in disbelief. "Wait. Does that mean they all died? Where are you going? You're leaving me alone in a place like this? Hey." But there was no answer. Watching the elevator disappear, Zeon muttered in panic, "He's leaving. Really?" Anger surged through him. "Those damn bastards. Just because he was in a bad mood, he sent me to a place like this." Furiously, he threw his pickaxe. "I hope they all die." Before he could finish cursing, the pickaxe bounced off a wall, flew back, and struck his safety helmet. Clang! The pickaxe then tumbled deeper into the tunnel. My pickaxe! Zeon shouted in shock. Come back! As he chased after it. He ventured farther into the tunnel. Looking around, he muttered. What is this place? He spread his hands and frowned. I was too angry to notice earlier, but there's an incredible amount of mana in this underground tunnel. Did the others not feel it because they're ordinary people? Covering part of his face with one hand while using the light on his helmet, he whispered. It's getting denser the farther I go. If an ordinary person came here, they would have suffered mana overload by now. Where is all this mana coming from? Suddenly, something caught his eye. He had found his pickaxe, but it was already broken. Laughing bitterly, Zeon picked it up. The handle's broken, but at least I found it. At that moment, his foot sank into the ground. I guess I still have some luck. Before he could finish speaking, a portal suddenly appeared beneath him. Zeon's eyes widened in shock. Wait! What is this? Is this a portal? The ground vanished beneath his feet. With a scream, he fell into the portal. His safety helmet and broken pickaxe were left behind as they bounced across the tunnel floor and came to rest in the darkness. Then everything became silent once again. Memories of his childhood flashed through Zeon's mind. When he was a child, people would look at him and whisper among themselves. That kid's going to die soon. His parents threw him away. What can anyone do about it? I just hope he doesn't drop dead in front of my house. A young Zeon stood alone in the pouring rain, clutching a small toy in his hands. What kind of life did I wish for again? He wondered. Even when he stole a piece of meat to satisfy his hunger, all he received was a beating. I only wish that I wouldn't have to go hungry. People chased him whenever he stole something just to survive. I wanted to be able to dream too. Then came the day he killed someone. The voices from that moment still echoed in his mind. Do you have any idea who you just killed? Let's see how long you can keep running for your life. Your pathetic little worm of a life is over now, you piece of trash. As those memories resurfaced, another thought crossed his mind. I just wanted a life where I didn't have to run away in terror. He remembered desperately fleeing while people hunted him down. Just make sure his head is still attached. Cut off his legs if you have to, but bring him here. Drag that bastard to Li Jiryong this instant. Without having to worry about dying. Without constantly looking over his shoulder. Without living in fear every single day. Well, something like that. A faint smile appeared on his face. A normal life. That's all I ever wanted. Back in the present, after falling through the portal, Zeon crashed hard onto the ground and lay unconscious. Small pieces of stone continued to fall around him, some striking his body. After a while, he slowly regained consciousness. Holding his aching head, he groaned. My head, what the? As he sat up, he immediately felt the oppressive heat surrounding him. Why is it so hot and muggy? He placed a hand on the ground beneath him and frowned. Is this ash? The moment he realized what he was touching, his body froze. Cold sweat formed on his face. Slowly, he raised his head and looked ahead. His eyes widened in shock. Damn it, that's right. The memories of the portal flashed through his mind. If I fell into a portal, then that means... A look of disbelief appeared on his face as he stared at his surroundings. This place is inside a dungeon. A stone suddenly bounced across the ground and landed near Zeon. He stared at it for a moment before picking it up. The instant it touched his palm, he squeezed his eyes shut and threw it away. Hot! Blowing on his injured hand, he muttered. So it really isn't a dream. He looked around at the scorching landscape. Dungeons are places that even Neo's soul has to prepare for thoroughly. Examining his hand, he continued. I guess this is volcanic ash. It's like sand scorched by fire. If I don't get out of here quickly, my lungs are going to fry. Zeon bent down and tore a piece of cloth from his pants. He wrapped it around his face to cover his nose and mouth. All right. If this dungeon has an entrance, then it has an exit too. The most likely location is the highest point in the dungeon, near that mountain peak. He fixed his gaze on the distant summit. If I stay here, the heat and volcanic ash will kill me anyway. Right now, with no magic beasts in sight, this is the perfect chance. As he started running, his thoughts continued. I'll take the shortest route and make a mad dash for it. That's right, I'm Zeon. The man who doesn't know when to quit. He leaped toward the volcano, jumping from one cliff to another. He barely landed on the edge of a rocky ledge. That was close. Suddenly, the edge beneath his feet crumbled and fell into the lava below. Panic flashed across his face. Please, please. At the last second, his hand caught another ledge. He dangled above the molten lava before pulling himself upward. As if a little lava could ever scare me. After climbing onto the cliff, he took a deep breath and clenched his fists in frustration. Bok Manhwa, you damn bastard! The second I get out of here, I'm going to kill you! Standing once more, he felt the heat intensify as anger coursed through his body. Sweat poured down his face. Getting angry only makes it hotter, damn it. Clenching his fists tighter, he stared ahead. I swear I'll survive this. I'll claw my way out of here and make it back no matter what. Looking ahead, he calculated the remaining distance. 4 more jumps. If I can make 4 more jumps, I'll reach it. Wiping the sweat from his hands, he shook his head. Don't stop moving. Stop thinking. His eyes sharpened. My life won't end in a place like this. Never, never. He broke into a sprint once more and launched himself into the air. I won't stop. Suddenly, the lava exploded. Roar! A gigantic crocodile burst from the molten sea with its jaws wide open. Before Zeon could react, the monster swallowed him whole and plunged back into the lava. The crocodile swam forward, believing its prey was dead. Then suddenly, something felt wrong. Its massive tail thrashed violently. Zeon was hanging from a cliff above, saved by the cloth wrapped around his body. During the attack, he had managed to catch the ledge and avoid being eaten. While dangling there, he stretched out a hand. The volcanic ash around him began to move. For volcanic ash to melt away like that. I had a feeling, but I really can control volcanic ash. A grin appeared on his exhausted face. It saved my life, but... Crack! The tiny ledge that he hanging with him broke apart. Zeon fell and crashed onto the ground near the gigantic crocodile. His vision blurred. The heat had become unbearable. Isn't this way too damn hot? His breathing grew ragged. This dungeon, the environment is more vicious than the magic beasts. My nasal passages feel roasted by the heat and ash. He struggled to inhale. I can't breathe. His thoughts became sluggish. My mind is going blank. His eyes slowly began to close. Am I going to die? Then he clenched his fist. No. With sheer determination, he forced himself up. It hasn't even been a minute since I swore I'd survive. He staggered to his feet. I haven't even had a girlfriend yet. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. Dying like this would be way too unfair. Gathering the last of his strength, he slammed his feet into the ground. The molten ash responded immediately. It swirled around him like a living storm. Old man Yama, sorry to say this, but you'll have to settle for a crocodile bag instead of me. Across from him, the giant crocodile lunged again with its jaws open. Zeon thrust his hand forward. The molten ash shot toward the monster like a deadly wave. Take this. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the volcanic wasteland. You possess quite an amusing ability. Zeon's eyes widened. What the? He looked around frantically. A voice? Is that old man Yama? The mysterious voice chuckled. To manipulate sand, amusing. Truly amusing. Zeon looked upward. Like hell it is. A figure was descending from the sky. The stranger wore a smirk as he fell effortlessly through the scorching air. Zeon's jaw dropped. Some old geezer is falling from the sky. As the old man fell from above, he grabbed the massive sword hanging on his back. Pulling it free with both hands, he smirked wildly as mana surged around the blade. Meanwhile, Zeon looked up at him in shock, his eyes wide open. He could feel the overwhelming pressure of the old man's mana. It's coming! The old man swung his sword. A devastating shockwave erupted from the blade and struck the giant crocodile directly. The impact was so powerful that the ground shattered. Zeon was thrown into the air for a brief moment by the force. Ash exploded in every direction, and cracks spread across the volcanic surface. Even the lava began flowing faster from the immense impact. Scorching ash blasted toward Zeon. Barely managing to hold himself in place, he covered his face with his arms. Then, with a shocked expression, he touched his ears. What just happened? He muttered in disbelief. I can't hear anything. This shockwave, what was that? Have my eardrums ruptured? Gritting his teeth, he looked toward the old man. Wait, that old geezer from earlier. No, forget that. His eyes widened. What about the monster? In front of him, the giant crocodile had been split cleanly into 2 pieces. The old man casually swung his sword once more before stepping forward. Zeon's arms trembled as he watched. He's different. Completely different. He isn't just some powerful awakener. He's an existence on an entirely different level. As the old man walked forward, the volcanic surface beneath his feet shattered with every step. Zeon froze. What is this guy? The old man stopped and looked at him. What's your name? Zeon remained frozen in shock. The old man sighed. Answer me before I count to 3. He rested his sword on his shoulder. 3. Zeon said nothing. 2. Still no response. 1. Nothing. The old man calmly put his sword back on his shoulder and stared at him. Time's up. He grabbed the sword's handle again. If you're not going to speak then. Before he could finish, Zeon suddenly realized his hearing had returned. Ah. I can hear again. The old man's expression remained cold. Die. Hearing that, Zeon immediately regained his senses. Wait. Wait. He shouted, waving his hands frantically. I don't know what's going on, but please spare me. The old man raised an eyebrow. Oh? So you're not a mute dumbass after all. I asked for your name. Zeon. He quickly replied. My name is Zeon. Zeon? The old man said. That's a dumbass name. Zeon's eye twitched. A dumbass name? What's this old geezer's name that's so great? Suddenly, the old man swung his sword again. Boom! Another enormous shockwave tore through the area. Zeon immediately covered his ears. Even though his hearing had returned, he couldn't bear the terrifying impact. The old man sheathed his sword once more. Deoden. Zeon blinked. What? My name is Deoden. Zeon stared at him nervously. Just what are you doing right now? About what? Deoden replied. Calling someone a dumbass every 5 seconds. Why do you keep threatening me like this? Zeon pointed at him. I'm grateful that you saved me, but did I do something wrong? Hey, dumbass, there it is again. Ignoring him, Deoden knelt and placed his hand on the volcanic round. By the looks of it, you got caught in a snare. Zeon frowned. Wow. The disrespect aside. What's a snare? It's a phenomenon that occurs when a dungeon experiences mana overload. To protect itself, the dungeon creates another entrance and expels mana through the opening. He paused. At the same time, it pulls nearby living creatures inside. That's called a snare. As Zeon listened, he remembered the living mass of molten ash surrounding him earlier. Fear crept down his spine. A normal person wouldn't witness one in their entire lifetime. Deoden continued. You've got some truly awful luck, brat. Zeon's face darkened as he remembered Bak Manho. Damn it, Bak Manho, you bastard. Deoden stood up. Hey, dumbass. Stop calling me a dumbass. In an instant, Deoden appeared behind him. One hand grabbed Zeon's head while the other rested on his chin. What the? Deoden sighed. Let me show you why you're a dumbass. Now gather mana into your eyes and stare. What are you doing? Shut up and do as you're told. His voice became serious. Increase the purity of your mana. Imagine you're seeing with mana instead of your eyes. Feel the flow of mana around you. Zeon reluctantly followed the instructions. As mana gathered in his eyes, his vision changed. His body froze. The giant crocodile wasn't actually a crocodile at all. It was a mass of molten lava that had shaped itself into the form of a crocodile. What is that? Zeon asked in shock. Deoden nodded. Looks like you can finally see it. It's a monster with cloaking abilities. Most prey die without ever realizing they've been hunted. His eyes narrowed. Just like you. Zeon's face turned pale. Something like this was right in front of me. And I never sensed its presence. Not even a hint of danger. If this old geezer hadn't shown up, I would have died without even knowing why. He looked at Deoden. He's saved my life twice now. Just how strong is he? Unable to hold back his curiosity any longer, Zeon asked. Who exactly are you? Deoden turned toward him with an annoyed look. Are you a complete dumbass? I already told you. He pointed at himself. I'm Deoden, you brat, Zeon shouted. No, I mean who the hell are you to have that kind of power? And where the hell are we? Deoden stepped forward without even turning around. Inside a dungeon, he replied calmly. And now, it's my hunting ground. Zeon frowned in confusion. Hunting ground? Yeah, Deoden answered. My hunting ground. As for my identity. He turned around and laughed. Use those eyes of yours and see for yourself. He called forth his sword, crying. A tremendous shockwave erupted from the blade and spread throughout the entire dungeon. The deafening roar forced Zeon to cover his ears and grit his teeth. What the? His eyes widened in shock as he looked up. What is that old geezer doing? The living creatures throughout the dungeon suddenly awoke. Flame-covered birds rose into the air and began circling around Zeon. What is this? Zeon muttered in disbelief. Then Deoden's voice echoed across the battlefield. Hey, idiot! Zeon quickly turned his attention toward him. Deoden gripped his massive sword and smirked. If you're worth anything, survive on your own. The fiery birds immediately lunged at Zeon. He barely managed to dodge. You bastards! Zeon shouted through gritted teeth. Why are they so fast? Another bird shot forward, leaving a deep wound across his arm. A second attack slashed his leg. Grabbing his injured arm, Zeon thrust out his hand and gathered the volcanic ash around him with his awakened power. Damn it! They're darting around like crazy. They're too fast. I can't even run away. Then frustration hit him. And why are they only attacking my left side? Raising his hand, Zeon pointed at the birds. The ash swirling around his arm compressed into a bullet-like projectile and shot toward them. The birds effortlessly dodged. 3 of them attacked together, biting into his arms and legs again. Covering himself with his arms, Zeon panicked. Damn it! Neither my sand nor my eyes can keep up with them. Attacks came from every direction. What do I do? I'm going to die if I stay like this. His gaze shifted toward Deoden. That old geezer has already saved my life twice. If I die here like this, I really am a useless idiot. Blood dripped from countless wounds onto the ground. I need to find a way. A way to see enemies that my eyes can't follow. Think. I need to think. At that moment, 2 enormous lava crocodiles emerged from the molten lake. Deoden glanced at Zeon. You idiot! I'll show you why you're an idiot. Zeon remained silent. covering his face as the birds continued attacking him. Deoden spoke firmly. Gather mana in your eyes and focus. Increase the purity of your mana. Imagine you're seeing with mana instead of your eyes. Feel the mana. Following the old man's instructions, Zeon's senses began to change. For the first time, he could clearly perceive the movements of the approaching flame birds. Immediately, he raised both hands and created an ash barrier, blocking their attack. Deoden continued speaking while fighting. Feel the monster's mana. See with mana, not your eyes. When their mana enters your range, counterattack from the shortest distance possible. As Zeon focused, he tracked the birds through their mana signatures. That old geezer, he muttered in amazement. Could it be? Did he see this far ahead? Just what kind of old man is he? This time, whenever a bird entered his range, Zeon reacted instantly, striking it down. Meanwhile, Deoden confronted the gigantic lava crocodiles. He leaped high into the air. The monsters opened their enormous jaws, attempting to devour him. With a mighty swing of Cryon, Deoden unleashed a massive wave of light that sliced through both crocodiles. Then he laughed. This is fun! So much fun! It's been a while since I've been this fired up. He crashed down onto one crocodile's head, slamming the enormous creature into the ground with tremendous force. The entire dungeon trembled. Deoden clenched his fist, gathering an overwhelming amount of mana around it. A savage grin spread across his face. More! More! His fist shot forward like a meteor. Boom! The impact tore the giant crocodile apart, splitting it cleanly into two pieces. Deoden threw back his head and roared with excitement. I said keep coming! Once again, the living dungeon created another monster. Suddenly, a massive rhinoceros-like creature burst from beneath the ground behind Deoden. The beast charged forward at full speed, shaking the earth beneath its feet. Deoden remained standing calmly in place. What a pity! He muttered. Without taking a single step, he casually swung his sword. Slash! A single strike was all it took. The rhinoceros monster was split apart instantly and collapsed into the ground. Deoden rested his sword on his shoulder and continued walking forward. Such a shame. I was just getting warmed up, he complained. Why are there so few monsters in dungeons these days? Back in my day. He let out a disappointed sigh. Meanwhile, Zeon stood there covered in wounds, still in shock. One of the dead bird monsters remained hanging from his arm where it had bitten him earlier. Wow, Zeon muttered. This is actually insane. I almost feel bad for the monsters. To kill all those massive creatures like they're nothing. He shook his head. It's so absurd that I don't even know what to say. Then he looked toward Deoden and laughed nervously. It looks like there aren't any monsters left, right? At that exact moment, a deafening roar echoed throughout the dungeon. Damn! I knew it! The entire dungeon trembled violently. The mountain above cracked apart as rivers of lava burst through the surface and flowed outward. The pressure carried by that roar alone was overwhelming. Zeon's body trembled uncontrollably. He gritted his teeth and struggled to remain standing, but eventually collapsed onto the ground. Cough! He vomited from the sheer pressure before wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Crazy! What was that just now? He coughed again. Now what? Standing behind him, Deoden replied calmly. That was the roar of the boss. The boss? Zeon asked. A gigantic foot suddenly appeared on top of a distant cliff. Lava dripped around it like a waterfall of fire. Deoden smirked. Every dungeon has a final boss that serves as the source of the area. His eyes narrowed. And it's the reason I entered this place. As a massive wing emerged from the smoke. Zeon's eyes widened. Boss! That thing is... Deoden laughed. You finally made your appearance. A colossal creature stepped onto the cliff. It possessed enormous wings, crimson scales, and a monstrous body that radiated overwhelming power. Opening its jaws, it unleashed another furious roar. It's a crimson drake, Deoden declared. Zeon stared in disbelief. A crimson drake? Isn't that basically a dragon? Unfortunately not, Deoden replied with a grin. Still, it should be at least a B-rank monster. At least B-rank, Zeon repeated. If that's true, then that means... His eyes suddenly focused on the shimmering aura surrounding the creature. A force field. Deoden raised an eyebrow. Oh? A cripple like he knows about force fields? Still sitting on the ground, Zeon answered. I've only heard stories. Monsters that reach B rank and above develop unique traits, just like awakened humans. He pointed toward the drake. Much like the rank insignias of awakeners, a red force field represents martial-type traits. And a blue force field like that one means... Before he could finish speaking, the crimson drake raised its claw. Instantly, enormous spears of ice formed in the air. With a furious roar, the drake launched them toward Deoden and Zeon. The gigantic ice projectiles tore through the sky. Zeon's face turned pale. It's a magic type, he shouted. Damn it! This thing is way too overpowered! At that moment, Deoden leaped into the air. His body shot upward like a cannonball. With a single swing of his sword, shing! Every ice spear was sliced into pieces. Thousands of frozen fragments scattered across the battlefield. Zeon stared at the shattered ice in complete disbelief, his eyes opened wide. Meaningless. His voice trembled. My common sense, my experience, everything I know. He looked up at the old warrior standing fearlessly before the Crimson Drake. In front of that old geezer. Zeon swallowed hard. It's all completely meaningless. As Deoden soared through the air, he raised his sword to strike. The Crimson Drake immediately opened its massive jaws. A blue force field gathered inside its mouth, condensing into a devastating magical attack. Before the Drake could unleash it, Deoden swung his sword downward. Boom! A tremendous shockwave crashed into the Drake's head. Its jaws snapped shut, and its massive head slammed into the ground. Enraged, the Crimson Drake raised its gigantic claw and swiped at Deoden. Deoden narrowly avoided the attack, but before he could escape completely, the Drake's claw closed around him. For the first time, Deoden looked slightly surprised. The Crimson Drake held him tightly before its face and opened its mouth once more. The blue force field gathered again, growing larger and more powerful with every second. Yet instead of fear, a grin spread across Deoden's face. Just before the attack could be released, he thrust his hand forward and forced the Drake's mouth shut. The compressed magical energy had nowhere to go. Boom! The force field exploded inside the Drake's mouth. The monster let out a muffled roar of agony. Deoden laughed loudly. Does it hurt, Drake? Gripping his sword with both hands, he raised it high. Fret not! His eyes gleamed with excitement. That pain. I shall personally end it for you. A dark aura gathered around his blade. Then he swung. A massive black shockwave erupted from the sword and tore into the Crimson Drake's stomach. The impact blasted the enormous creature backward. The Drake screamed in pain as its body was thrown across the battlefield. Deoden pointed his sword at the monster and roared. Because today is the day of your funeral. Meanwhile, far away from the clash, Zeon was desperately running for his life. Damn it! He shouted. Today is the day of my funeral. The battle between Deoden and the Crimson Drake continued without mercy. Every collision between their force fields sent devastating shockwaves across the dungeon. The ground shattered, cliffs collapsed. Lava erupted from deep cracks in the earth. Zeon struggled just to survive. Those crazy bastards! He yelled. Whatever your problem is, talk it out with words. Another enormous shockwave rushed toward him. Gritting his teeth, Zeon raised both hands. His awakening ability activated. Sand rose from the ground and formed a barrier in front of him. The incoming shockwave slammed into it. Boom! Zeon's feet dug into the earth as he fought against the pressure. His entire body trembled. Seriously? He muttered through clenched teeth. Take your fight somewhere else. The barrier cracked. How can shockwaves alone be this powerful? More sand gathered around him, creating additional layers of protection. At the center of the battlefield, Deoden laughed like a maniac. How fun! So much fun! He stood atop the Crimson Drake's head and plunged his sword deep into its skull. Doesn't it feel like we're at an amusement park, Crimson Drake? The Drake roared in fury. Deoden ripped the sword free and slammed the monster back into the ground. The impact shattered the battlefield once again. A gigantic shockwave spread outward in every direction. This time, it was even stronger. Zeon's eyes widened. His body froze. The approaching wall of force was simply too overwhelming. No! Tears formed in his eyes as frustration and fear consumed him. The shockwave struck. Boom! Zeon was launched high into the air. He tumbled violently across the ground before being thrown toward the edge of a cliff. His eyes widened in horror. No! The ground beneath him disappeared. Zeon fell from the cliff. Below him flowed a raging river of molten lava. Fear filled his eyes as the burning sea rushed closer and closer. I'm going to die. The thought echoed through his mind. Meanwhile, Deoden and the Crimson Drake continued their battle without noticing Zeon's situation. Neither of them realized that he was falling straight toward the lava river below. Deoden laughed, his eyes burning with rage as a dark smirk spread across his face. Grasping the hilt of his massive blade, he prepared to strike again. Is this all you've got, Crimson Drake? He taunted. With a powerful downward blow, he smashed the blade against the dragon's head once more. To think the boss of this dungeon keeps bowing its head to me. The very title of boss must be weeping. As the impact rattled the cavern floors, the Crimson Drake grew furious. Snarling, it bared its fangs and began gathering a massive amount of field force directly into its gaping maw, its rage reaching a boiling point. Deoden merely laughed, his excitement only growing. Oh ho! As expected of a dungeon boss. You even know how to do that? Having gathered an immense amount of energy, the Crimson Drake unleashed the concentrated field force straight at Deoden with every ounce of its remaining strength. The attack was catastrophic. The sheer force of the dragon's roar obliterated everything in its path, shattering the very walls of the dungeon. As the smoke began to clear, the Crimson Drake scanned the destruction, confident that its foe had been completely obliterated. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the ruins. Are you looking for me? The Crimson Drake flinched, a sudden spike of terror striking its heart as an overwhelming pressure washed over the chamber. It was Deoden. Channeling a torrent of mana, he had drastically increased both the size and cutting power of his blade. Dark, volatile energy chanted and swirled around the colossal weapon. With a devastating swing, Deoden slammed the giant sword directly into the Crimson Drake's chest. The impact sent the dragon crashing into the earth. The ground shattered beneath its immense weight as it screamed in agonizing pain. Blood erupted from its mouth, and its heavy head slammed into the dirt. Furious and dazed, the beast stared down at its own chest, only to see Deoden landing gracefully right upon it, his sword firmly embedded in its flesh. "I scoured the desert for an entire year just to catch you," Deoden said coldly. He gripped the hilt with both hands, his voice dropping to a calm, lethal whisper. "I need your heart to temper Cryan. Now die." With a brutal thrust, he drove the sword deeper into the dragon's heart. Cryan answered, unleashing a violent surge of red energy directly into the beast's core. The crimson light pulsed fiercely, carving even deeper into the dying monster. Cryan began to glow with a blinding, furious radiance, shifting its shape as it evolved into an even more formidable weapon than before. Stepping back into a relaxed stance, Deoden examined his weapon. Cryan had completely absorbed the Crimson Drake's residual field force. Feeling the raw, newly awakened power coursing through the hilt, Deoden's smirk returned. "You've grown stronger, Cryan." Suddenly, Zeon's voice echoed from behind him. "Hey, old geezer! Were you really talking to a sword? Are you some kind of crazy old man?" Deoden shifted his gaze towards Zeon. Hanging from the edge of the cliff, Zeon looked at him and continued. "But to actually take down that drake in the end, you're one ridiculously overpowered old geezer." Deoden sheathed his sword and smirked. "Oh? You clawed. Somehow you managed to survive?" Zeon scratched his cheek nervously. "Yeah, well, I almost died, but—" His mind flashed back to the moment he had fallen into the river of lava. At first, he had been certain he was going to die. In desperation, he grabbed his head with both hands and gritted his teeth. Then, with all the strength he could muster, he gathered as much sand as possible using his awakened power. The sand swirled around him and formed a protective cushion beneath his body. He crashed into the sand instead of the lava. After landing, he lay there gasping for breath. "Damn it! I survived this too," he muttered. "I'm really resilient, aren't I?" Back in the present, Zeon looked at Deoden. "Getting hit by the shockwaves from some crazy old geezer over and over improved my reflexes. That's how I survived." Deoden burst into laughter. "Not bad for a clod." At that moment, cracks began spreading across the sky above them. Deoden grabbed Zeon by the back of his shirt. "Now that the boss is dead, the dungeon will soon collapse. We'd better leave." Zeon looked confused. As Deoden continued dragging him, Zeon glanced up and asked, "Then why are you holding me?" Deoden only laughed. The next moment, he hurled Zeon toward a portal that had appeared in front of them. "Farewell, you clod!" As he flew through the air toward the portal, Zeon shouted angrily. "Hey, you lunatic! You're even worse than Bak Manhwa, you bastard!" Suddenly, everything went silent. Zeon's expression changed as he found himself in a completely different place. He crashed into a pile of sand and rolled several times before coming to a stop. Spitting sand out of his mouth, he groaned. "Where am I now?" A moment later, Deoden stepped through the portal and landed nearby. "What do you mean, where?" he replied. "We're outside the dungeon, obviously. The rift created when a dungeon collapses serves as an exit." Zeon frowned. "Then why didn't you just walk out normally?" Before he could finish speaking, Deoden's expression suddenly turned serious. "Listen carefully, Claude." Looking down at Zeon, who was still sitting in the sand, he continued. "I need your ability to manipulate sand. But right now, you're so weak that you're completely useless to me." He pointed toward the horizon on the left. "If you head in that direction, you'll eventually reach Neo's soul. You can return there and continue living the life you've always known." Then he pointed his thumb toward himself. "Or, you can follow me and become something greater than the clod you are now." Zeon blinked in confusion. "What are you suddenly talking about? Follow you? For how long?" Deoden shrugged. "I don't know. It could take months. It could take years. It could even take decades. Even when the time comes, I won't know." His gaze sharpened. "So make your choice now." He paused before continuing. "Will you return to your familiar and comfortable life? Or will you throw yourself into a gamble where there's a 99% chance of dying?" With a serious expression, Deoden asked once more. "Now choose." Zeon stared at him nervously and fell silent for a moment. Zeon smirked as he rose to his feet. "A choice. Don't make me laugh." With a crazed grin, he pointed a finger at Deoden. "Hey, old geezer! Are you really out of your mind? You expect me to give up a house, a bed, and some shade just to walk through this scorching desert with you?" "Yeah, that's right," Deoden replied calmly. Zeon took a deep breath and rubbed the back of his neck. "Then there's nothing more to talk about." As he walked past Deoden, he added, "I'll follow you. I'm the type who absolutely has to pay people back when they piss me off, but I'm still too weak to get my revenge." A smirk appeared on his face. "Well, that includes you too, old geezer." He held out his hand towards Deoden. "You're overwhelmingly stronger than anyone I've ever seen. And I have a feeling I won't meet anyone stronger than you in the future either." So I'm certain. Daoden laughed. Certain of what? That you'll die? Zeon clenched his fist. Sand swirled around it as he unconsciously displayed a glimpse of his newly awakened power. No. I'm certain that if I follow you, I'll become stronger than anyone else. The old man smirked. Then the day will certainly come when you regret it. Turning around, he began walking. Follow me, you idiot! We have a long way to go. Stop calling me an idiot! Zeon quickly protested. As time passed, the blazing sun scorched the endless sea of sand beneath a cloudless sky. Sweat poured down Zeon's face. Frustrated and exhausted, he shouted, Hey, let's go a little slower. Raising a hand, he tried to stop Daoden. Old geezer, we've already been walking for 6 hours. Let's take a break. Daoden remained silent and continued walking. That only made Zeon angrier. Why aren't you saying anything? You're not a teenage girl. Why are your mood swings so crazy? A look of concern appeared on his face. It's so hot. 40 degrees. No. It has to be at least 50. It's hard to even walk because of this damned sand. At this rate, I'm guaranteed to get heat stroke or die of dehydration. What the hell am I supposed to do? His feet sank into the sand with every step, making it increasingly difficult to move forward. Then Daoden finally spoke without turning around. What a complete fool. Zeon looked up. What do you mean? You can't even utilize 1% of the power you possess. Zeon frowned. Having the ability to manipulate sand and still struggling to walk through it is pathetic. That's what I mean. Zeon placed a hand against his ear and shouted back in frustration. That's easy for you to say. I only awakened the other day. And what does that matter? Daoden asked. I'm only an F rank. I'm not some high-ranking awakener like you, old geezer. Hearing that, Daoden gritted his teeth in anger. He spun around and shouted. Stop spouting that idiotic nonsense. What does it matter whether you're an F rank or an S rank? He grabbed Zeon's collar. Do you think anyone is born in S rank from the start? Even if there are people like that, they were simply born blessed. Zeon's eyes widened in shock as he froze. Daoden continued shouting. So what? Are you just going to give up on life because you weren't blessed? He pointed at Zeon. In the eyes of others, you're blessed enough. Blessed. Zeon thought, unable to understand. Daoden finally calmed down and released his collar. So stop whining and start thinking about how to utilize your abilities. He gave a short laugh. What's the point of having all your limbs intact when your brain is that of an idiot? Placing a hand firmly on Zeon's shoulder, he continued. It's your ability. Obviously, you should know it best. The way to break through that thick skull of yours, grow stronger, and learn how to utilize your power, those are things you must figure out yourself. Daoden tightened his grip. Old geezer. Zeon muttered painfully. The old man's grip became even stronger, causing Zeon to cry out. Got it, you idiot? If you can't figure it out, consider yourself dead. I get it. I get it. Zeon shouted in pain. Just loosen your grip a little. After that, Zeon planted his feet firmly into the sand and activated his awakening ability. The sand around him began to swirl as he took control of it. The sand I can control is only within a 5-meter radius. Zeon muttered while observing the flowing grains. A bit disappointing, but it should be enough. He took a step forward while experimenting with his power. The sand keeps sinking up to my ankles. If I can solve that, I can reduce my stamina consumption. What if I condense the sand and make it solid? As soon as he tried it, his feet no longer sank into the sand. Great, it works! He exclaimed excitedly. My feet aren't sinking anymore, and it's incredibly easy to walk. Daoden didn't react. He simply continued walking forward without even turning around. Zeon stopped and closed his eyes. But the mana consumption is too severe, he thought. If I'm thinking long-term, I should scrap this method. He then channeled mana into his legs. What if I focus mana into both legs instead? He took a few more steps. Oh, it's definitely easier to walk. If I do this here. But then I'm not really utilizing my ability. Next. He continued muttering to himself while trying different approaches. Daoden let out a quiet sigh. Ah, to be young, he thought. The willingness to keep trying without giving up, that's the privilege of youth. Even though he's only F rank, his power and mana control are already around E or D rank level. If it's that kid, I'm sure. At that moment, Zeon finally found a solution. By concentrating mana into his feet and controlling only the sand directly beneath them, he managed to move effortlessly across the desert. It works. Laughing with excitement, he sprinted forward and quickly caught up to Daoden. Hey, old geezer, look at this. Zeon shouted. I only control the sand touching my feet with mana, and it's ridiculously easy to walk. Daoden's eyes shifted towards him. With a grin, Zeon raised his middle finger and continued teasing him. You can't do this, can you, old man? He laughed. I'm walking comfortably now. What are you going to do about it? Before Zeon could say another word, Daoden suddenly smashed his fist into the top of his head. Zeon's vision went black instantly. He lost consciousness and collapsed face first into the sand. Running around and making a nuisance of yourself. Daoden grumbled. Don't waste unnecessary energy or you'll die. We don't have time for this, so hurry up and... He paused. Hey, idiot? There was no response. Hey! You idiot! Still nothing. Daoden's expression stiffened slightly. Breathe. Zeon remained motionless, completely unconscious from the powerful blow to his head. As night fell, Zeon slowly regained consciousness. Opening his eyes, he muttered, Where am I? Daoden sat in front of him, chewing on a piece of jerky. Noticing that Zeon was awake, he scoffed. You're awake, dumbass? I'm busy enough as it is, but thanks to you, I've ended up wasting my time. He tossed a piece of jerky in front of Zeon. With little energy left, Zeon replied lazily. Hey, it's not like I was resting at some luxury resort. My whole body is covered in wounds and injuries. Looking at the dried meat in front of him, he asked. It's jerky? Without waiting for an answer, he put it into his mouth and began chewing. Eat while you listen, Daoden said calmly. This is a story from when I was young. Back then, even if you were weak, even if you were worse off than others, survival wasn't an issue. In fact, protecting the weak was considered a noble act. Can you imagine that? Zeon remained silent, listening carefully. But as you know, the world has changed. Daoden continued. To you, this might seem like common sense, but I still can't get used to it. If you want to die, then lie there comfortably. If not, get up on your own 2 feet, dumbass. Zeon tossed the jerky wrapper aside and sat upright. All right. I get it. As he looked at Daoden, a thought crossed his mind. I expected as much, but he's really lived for a long time. Just how much time and how many memories has he accumulated? His eyes drifted to the old man's jerky. He's still eating that jerky. He's not chewing it, he's softening it with his saliva first. Zeon took another bite while observing him. In a desert where moisture is scarce, I guess that's the right way to do it. Geez, he could have told me beforehand. Lowering his gaze, he continued thinking. Rather than giving me a fish, it feels more like he's teaching me how to catch one. Then he paused. Well, I've never actually seen a fish before though. Looking back up, he stretched out his hand. Old geezer, give me another piece. Shut your trap. Daoden replied immediately. A cold breeze suddenly swept across the desert. Zeon folded his arms and shivered. I forgot that desert nights are cold as hell. Behind him, Daoden stood up and stretched his arms. Then Zeon remembered something. The crazy old geezer kept talking to his sword all night, so I couldn't even sleep. Is he insane? Feeling his throat dry up, Zeon asked. I'm so thirsty. Is there any water around? Before he could finish speaking, he watched Daoden squeeze moisture from his clothes and drink the collected droplets. Zeon's eyes widened. Again. He kept it a secret and drank it all by himself. Quickly, he stood up and began licking the moisture from his own clothes and skin. The old man was collecting dew that had gathered on his clothes overnight. No wonder he slept with them spread out. Just you wait. You crazy old geezer. When I become super strong, I'm definitely getting my revenge. Suddenly, Daoden spoke. Hey, idiot. Zeon's face twisted with annoyance. I'm not an idiot. I'm a dumbass. Daoden ignored the complaint. Can you feel it yet? Zeon blinked. Feel what? Then his expression changed. These vibrations. He looked around nervously. It's not just 1 or 2. They're surrounding us bighorn hyenas. Standing beside him, Daoden nodded. They're bighorn hyenas. They're usually nocturnal, but it looks like we caught them right before dawn. He glanced at Zeon and smirked. Dumbass, do you think you can survive on your own? Or do you need my help again? In response, Zeon manipulated the sand beneath his feet. A stream of sand shot forward and struck one of the approaching hyenas. Laughing confidently, he replied, Your help? I don't need it. The horned hyenas launched their attack together. Standing behind Daoden, Zeon spread both hands and gathered as much sand as he could with his awakening power. I'll figure it out myself, he shouted. And survive on my own. Gritting his teeth, Zeon poured his mana into the sand. Raising a finger, he twisted the sand into a concentrated projectile and fired it like a bullet, instantly taking down one of the horned hyenas. His eyes quickly shifted to another direction. In an instant, he raised a sand barrier behind him. Multiple pillars of sand surged upward like mountains, slamming into the charging horned hyenas. You crazy bastards! Zeon yelled in frustration. Just how many of you are there? After using so much mana, he bent over and clutched his chest while breathing heavily. Before I get bitten to death, he muttered between breaths. I'm going to run out of mana and die first. A plan. I need to come up with a plan. As the army of horned hyenas continued rushing toward him, Zeon's expression hardened. Raw power isn't what's important, he thought. I need efficient attacks and better mana management. Closing his eyes for a brief moment, he twisted the sand in his palm while concentrating. How can I fight while using less mana? Think. Suddenly, a horned hyena lunged forward and sank its teeth into his arm. Zeon's eyes snapped open in shock. What the? Panicking, he punched the beast away with his free hand. Hey, you damn mutt! I'm trying to think here, he shouted. You cowardly! Looking down at the wound on his arm, tears welled up in his eyes from the pain and anger. This crazy bastard put a hole in my arm, he muttered. Then he stared at the bite mark and blinked. A hole. His expression suddenly froze. A ventilation hole. Meanwhile, the pack of horned hyenas charged forward at incredible speed, their eyes filled with wild bloodlust. Zeon continued thinking. Behind him, dozens of horned hyenas opened their jaws and lunged toward him, ready to tear him apart. Just as they were about to sink their teeth into him, Zeon's eyes widened. Right, holes, he muttered. A smirk appeared on his face. I just need to put holes in them. In an instant, Zeon seized control of the surrounding sand with his awakening power. The sand erupted from the ground like countless sharp spears. The spikes shot upward through the open mouths of the charging horned hyenas, piercing straight through their heads. Blood splattered as the sand tore through flesh and bone. One after another, the horned hyenas were impaled before they could even reach him. Watching the result, Zeon grinned. Just like that, he thought. Zeon burst into laughter as he looked at the horned hyenas hanging lifelessly from the sand spikes. Yeah! Do I really need to blow their heads off? He said with a grin. Whether their heads explode or just get a hole punched through them, dead is dead. Another pack of horned hyenas charged at him, their eyes filled with bloodlust as they opened their jaws and lunged forward. During combat, mana is directly linked to your life, Zeon thought. Panicking and wasting too much mana will only lead you to an early grave. Without hesitation, he manipulated the sand once more. A sharp spear formed instantly and shot forward, piercing through a horned hyena's skull and leaving a clean hole through its head. Use the minimum lethality required for the opponent and the minimum amount of mana. You have to fight with cost efficiency. The old geezer must be taking them down slowly, one by one too. As he continued slaughtering the horned hyenas, mana flowed through his body, causing his eyes to glow faintly. Suddenly, a loud burst of laughter echoed across the battlefield. Zeon froze. His eyes immediately shifted toward Daoden. One of the horned hyenas had its jaws clamped tightly around Daoden's arm. Daoden simply laughed. What are you doing? He asked. That tickles. The beast dug its fangs deeper into his arm. You damn mutt! Still laughing, Daoden reached for the massive blade strapped to his back. I can't let a dog that bites people live. A sinister smirk appeared on his face as bloodlust filled his eyes. All of you die right here. The moment Zeon felt the pressure radiating from him, his eyes widened in alarm. Wait, he muttered. His arms instantly crossed in front of his chest. That old geezer is going to do it again. On the other side, Daoden raised his enormous blade and roared. I'll wipe you all out. A dark crimson light erupted from the blade. Boom! A devastating shockwave tore across the battlefield, ripping through the ground and blasting everything in its path. The horned hyenas were hurled through the air like leaves caught in a hurricane. Even Zeon was forced to brace himself as the overwhelming force threatened to throw him away as well. When the shockwave finally faded, Zeon slowly looked forward. His eyes froze. That damn old geezer is seriously. A gigantic crater had been carved into the earth. Blood stained the surrounding ground. Pieces of horned hyena corpses rained from the sky, landing around Zeon's feet. His jaw slowly dropped. Is he even human? Is something like this possible without a skill? Damn. A cold sweat ran down his face. I really need to watch my mouth around him from now on. One wrong move and I'll really... Suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed across the battlefield. Zeon's words caught in his throat as he snapped his head toward the source of the sound. Daoden stood atop the fallen horned hyena as it let out a panicked roar. You're going to burst my eardrums, Daoden said casually. Are you the alpha female? For an alpha, you sure make a lot of noise. Suddenly, the horned hyena's eyes blazed with bloodlust. Lightning crackled around its horn as a powerful force field began to form around it. Daoden's expression shifted slightly. This is... He waved a hand through the energy. A force field? His eyes narrowed. You bastard. You're above B rank. The alpha horned hyena roared and charged forward, driving its lightning-covered horns straight at Daoden. On the other side of the battlefield, Zeon's eyes widened in alarm. Old geezer, look out! But Daoden didn't move. Instead, he casually raised a hand and grabbed the incoming force field. Zeon froze. What? The lightning crackled violently around Daoden's arm, but he merely rolled his shoulder and laughed. Nice and tingly. Crack. That really loosened up my stiff shoulders. The alpha horned hyena bared its teeth in fury. Daoden grinned. Well, since the massage is over. His eyes flashed with killing intent. Die. Boom. His fist shot forward and slammed directly into the beast's chest. The impact shattered its body instantly. Blood exploded outward in every direction. A few drops even landed on Zeon's face. For a moment he simply stared. Then he slowly began clapping. Right. He muttered with a nervous laugh. Who am I even worrying about? He shook his head. It's probably better for my mental health if I stop paying attention to that monster. After the battle, Zeon gathered every usable part from the horned hyenas. He wrapped pieces of hide around himself for protection and storage. Looking at Deoden, he asked. Looks like you've caught them all. Should we get going now? Deoden was busy dragging the massive horn from the Alpha's corpse. Oh, you're still alive, dumbass. Zeon pointed at the giant horn. Are you taking that with you? The horns of big-horned hyenas have many uses, Deoden replied. Since it carries a lightning attribute, it'll make an excellent weapon after refinement. A moment later, he tossed a dagger toward Zeon. Thunk. The blade embedded itself into the hide Zeon was carrying. It's a dagger, Zeon said, pulling it free. From now on, Deoden replied while carving pieces from the horn. You'll procure your own food. There won't be any more free handouts. Using the dagger, he cut a large chunk of meat from the corpse. The muscles of a big-horned hyena are highly toxic. Eat them and you'll die. He pointed to another section of meat. But the flank meat is poison-free. Zeon nodded nervously. Deoden looked at him and frowned. What are you staring blankly at for? The sun will be up soon. Hurry up, dumbass. Soon afterward, the sun rose over the desert. Yes, sir, Zeon replied. As they traveled, Zeon happily chewed on jerky. This is great, he said with a laugh. I'm a little thirsty, but I've got plenty to eat. And thanks to my skill, walking through the sand is a breeze. He sped up and walked beside Deoden. Old geezer, are you jealous? Zeon teased. I wonder if you're pushing yourself too hard at your age. Deoden immediately threw a punch. Zeon dodged it and stuck out his tongue. Ha. I dodged it this time. Then, thud. Deoden smacked him on the head with the flat of his massive sword. Zeon's tongue was still hanging out when he crashed face first into the sand. He hadn't even seen the attack coming. Deoden rested the sword back on his shoulder and sighed. You crazy bastard. He shook his head. Some of us are working our bones off just to keep walking, and this idiot starts acting up because he got one lousy skill. Face buried in the sand, Zeon groaned in pain while Deoden continued walking as if nothing had happened. Zeon on his knees, placing both hands on the ground. Even then, he couldn't resist teasing Deoden. Can't a guy play a little joke? He complained. I'm already dying of thirst, and you shoved my face straight into the sand. Deoden didn't respond. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on something in the distance. Zeon noticed his unusual behavior and frowned. Hey, I'm talking to you. What are you looking at? Then he suddenly paused. Wait, this feeling. A faint sensation brushed against his skin. Moisture. Am I imagining things? His eyes widened. No. The fact that the old geezer is staring in the same direction means. Excitement began to build inside him. Is it really there? Just beyond this. His heart raced as a single thought filled his mind. An oasis. Without wasting another second, the two of them began walking toward the source of that hope. After crossing the next stretch of dunes, they finally arrived. Zeon was the first to react. It's really here. His eyes sparkled with excitement and disbelief. The thing I'd only heard about in rumors. Before him lay a magnificent oasis, its clear water shimmering beneath the blazing desert sun. Overwhelmed with joy, Zeon spread both arms wide, unable to contain his excitement. Meanwhile, Deoden simply stood in silence, calmly gazing at the oasis before them. Zeon quickly drifted through the sand toward the oasis, laughing excitedly. Water! It's water! How many days has it been since I last saw water? Deoden stood where he was, watching Zeon with clenched teeth and visible irritation. Meanwhile, Zeon ran toward the water with a wide grin. Finally! Without hesitation, he plunged his face into the oasis and drank eagerly. It's soaking in. It's really soaking in. In this damn desert where the temperature is over 50 degrees. For the first time in days, coolness is flowing through my body. I'm so happy. Suddenly, his eyes widened. A bright light appeared beneath the water. What is that? A light? It's blinding and warm. Somehow. I feel kind of lethargic. At that moment, a furious voice echoed behind him. Snap out of it, you dumb bastard! But Zeon couldn't look away from the light. It was Deoden. Seeing the danger, Deoden rushed forward. The source of the light was a massive sand angler. Using the glowing lantern on its forehead, it hypnotized its prey before devouring them. Its enormous mouth opened as it lunged toward Zeon. Deoden quickly grabbed Zeon by the back of his collar and yanked him away. The sand angler burst out of the water and snapped its jaws shut where Zeon had been moments earlier. Zeon stared in shock. Deoden immediately leaped into the air and drew the sword strapped to his back. Gripping it tightly, he unleashed a powerful slash. The sand angler was blasted back into the oasis. The force of the strike sent water soaring into the air before it rained back down around them. Zeon looked up in amazement. Whoa! Crazy! So that's what they call a rainbow. After defeating the monster, Deoden grabbed it by the tail and dragged its enormous body toward the shore. When he reached Zeon, he tossed the creature onto the sand. It's a sand angler, Deoden explained. It lures its prey with a lantern on its forehead and then devours them. Zeon looked surprised. Deoden suddenly gritted his teeth and slammed his elbow into Zeon's face. Zeon stumbled backward as blood dripped from his nose. Touching his cheek in shock, he looked at Deoden. Where the hell did you throw away everything I taught you, you idiot? Deoden shouted. Did you think you were a big shot just because you got a little used to things? His voice grew even louder. Idiots like you are always the first to die in this desert. Do you understand, you dumb bastard? Yes. Zeon replied quietly. Deoden sighed and turned away. Skin it. Zeon blinked. Skin it? A sand angler is a C-rank monster. The skin on its belly is soft and elastic, making it perfect for creating a robe. Cut it off and make one. Zeon tilted his head. Do you need a robe? Deoden put a hand on his forehead in frustration. Not for me. Make one for yourself, you absolute damn idiot. He pointed angrily at Zeon. How is your intelligence dropping by the minute? There has to be a reason. Did you get hit by a spell that petrified your left brain and corroded your right? Hearing that, tears began forming in Zeon's eyes. I'm sorry. Deoden ignored him and looked at the sand angler. It's changed quite a bit. Examining the monster closely, he continued. The sand angler closely resembles the fish that used to live on Earth. This must be your first time seeing a fish. Take a good look. Or don't. I don't care. Zeon stared at the monster. That's a fish? It's my first time seeing one. He shivered. Fish are scary. Taking out his dagger, he tried cutting through the creature's skin. Nothing happened. Deoden, who was resting with his head against the monster's body, spoke calmly. Are you scratching its back? It feels so good that even a dead fish might come back to life. Zeon flinched. Ah, come on. I can do it myself. He muttered under his breath. This is tougher than I thought. Closing his eyes, Zeon held the dagger against the skin and infused it with mana. Infuse the blade with mana to increase its cutting power. Sharpen the fin until it's thin enough to use as a needle. Use tendons carved from its flesh as thread. This is... For a brief moment, his eyes sparkled with inspiration. Several minutes later, however, he collapsed onto his knees in defeat. It's a total failure. The robe he had attempted to make looked terrible. Deoden glanced at the result while still leaning against the sand angler. Then he shook his head. Idiot. He pointed at the ruined materials. You turned a fish into trash. Deoden laughed and said to Zeon. I still have plenty of materials left. Let's try this one more time. Zeon continued working, and before he knew it, night had fallen. After finishing his latest attempt, Zeon shouted excitedly. It worked! It's finally finished! Looking at the robe, he grinned and said. After 8 failures, finally. This is so good I could sell it, right? Welcome to the Zeon boutique! Behind him, Deoden tore off a large piece of the sand angler and called out. Hey, idiot! Zeon quickly turned around and nervously shouted. No! Don't want to! Can't give it! Won't give you my robe! Deoden held up the massive piece of sand angler meat and frowned. Stop spouting nonsense. Eat this. Seeing a strange liquid dripping from the meat, Zeon pointed at it curiously. What is that? A sand angler's gallbladder. Deoden replied. It's a rare medicine. Eat every last bit of it. Don't leave a single gram. Then he laughed. If you don't eat it, you'll die. He handed it to Zeon and added. Hurry up and take it. My arm's about to fall off. Zeon nervously grabbed it and thought, I hope his arm really does fall off. Staring at the gallbladder, he felt like he was about to vomit. Alright, damn it. If it's medicine, it'll probably be disgustingly bitter, but that's still better than getting beaten to death. Gathering his courage, he took a bite. As he ate, his eyes widened. What is this? It feels like I'm eating a cloud. No matter how much I eat, I don't feel full at all. Well, thanks to that, I finished it faster. Suddenly, Deoden called out. Hey, idiot! Zeon's eyes shifted toward him. Deoden was casually roasting sand angler meat over a fire while eating. It's time for you to burn to death. Zeon looked around in confusion. What are you talking about now? The next moment, a tremendous heat erupted inside his body. His eyes widened in horror. He grabbed his neck with both hands as his face turned red. What the hell? My body, it's burning. No. It's way beyond just being hot. My body, my mana, it's all going out of control. It hurts. It feels like a sun is writhing inside my stomach. At this rate, I'm really going to. He screamed in agony. Behind him, Deoden calmly said. Endure it, idiot. As he gazed toward the oasis, Deoden thought, everything is like this oasis. Soon it will sink beneath the quicksand and disappear as though it never existed. Even then, sand anglers will be born again and return once more. Thus, the cycle of life continues. Suddenly, Zeon's scream interrupted his thoughts. Damn it, old geezer! Deoden looked at him. Still clutching his neck. Zeon shouted. Stop getting lost in your crappy sentiments, and save me already! Deoden looked at him with pity but remained silent. I'll kill you, old geezer! Zeon yelled. Shut up already! Deoden replied calmly. I'm trying to get some sleep. When Zeon opened his eyes again, it was already daytime. Where am I? Suddenly, Deoden appeared right in front of him with a grin. Are you awake, idiot? Zeon nearly jumped out of his skin. You scared me. Don't just appear like that. Laughing, Deoden turned around. Did you sleep well, idiot? Rubbing his head, Zeon replied. I didn't sleep. I passed out, you know, is that so? Deoden asked. Then how does your body feel? My body. Zeon looked down at his hand. Well, it feels the same. Then his eyes widened. No, it doesn't. He clenched his fist tightly. My body feels as light as a grain of sand. My muscles are tough as steel wire, and my mana is surging like a raging storm. He stared at his hands in disbelief. What is this? To think I've grown this much so suddenly, what happened? It's thanks to the Sand Angler's gallbladder. Deoden replied while continuing to eat the roasted meat. His eyes shifted toward Zeon. A Sand Angler's gallbladder is a rare and priceless medicine for those crossing the desert. It grants the power to withstand the sun and the sand. To merchants and caravans, it's worth as much as a mana stone. He smirked. Looks like the medicine worked even better than expected. Congratulations, idiot. Zeon was stunned. Something that precious. Was it really okay to give it to me? Deoden burst into laughter. It's because you're so damn weak. He pointed at Zeon with a piece of meat. If I'm going to drag you around, you need to be at least a little useful. Laughing loudly, Zeon ran toward Deoden and said, I understand. I'll become useful. Zeon the useful. Zeon the reliable. Deoden stabbed his sword into the sand behind him and held up a massive piece of roasted sand angler meat, a piece he had practically roasted his entire body to obtain. Shut up and eat your food, he said. We're not leaving until we finish the angler. Time passed as they continued eating. By the time they were finished, the sun was already high in the sky, and drifting sand had begun to cover the remains of their campsite. Deoden touched the sand angler's bones and muttered. There was more meat than I thought. To think we managed to eat our fill for 4 whole days. He then looked toward Zeon. Shall we set off again, idiot? Wearing his newly made robe, Zeon simply smiled. Then, with a confident grin, he stepped forward. Yes. Deoden followed behind him. Not long afterward, a powerful sandstorm swept across the desert. The fierce wind slammed into Zeon, but he calmly chewed on a piece of jerky as though nothing had happened. A sandstorm. Thanks to my ability, it just feels like a cool breeze. He glanced at Deoden. But the old geezer is walking just fine without even slowing down. The raging storm didn't affect him in the slightest. And he hasn't said a single word for days. Is he going through menopause or something? Zeon raised his voice. Hey! We've been walking for 2 weeks without stopping. Does that guy even know where we're going? Deoden didn't respond. Zeon let out a long sigh. Damn it! Did that crazy old geezer lose his way? Suddenly, something brushed against the sand behind him. A beast's roar echoed through the desert. Without even turning around, Zeon casually flicked a finger. A compressed bullet of sand shot backward. Shut up, you! The creature hissed and slithered through the sand. Zeon sighed again. Seriously? How much farther do we have to go? Then his eyes shifted behind him. His expression changed. It's tougher than I thought, isn't it? Activating his awakened ability, he extended his senses beneath the desert floor. I was hoping we could just pass by unnoticed. But it looks like that's not going to happen this time. As his awareness spread through the sand, he detected numerous creatures lurking beneath the surface. These guys are dead serious. Zeon bent down and placed one hand against the sand while raising the other to control the surrounding desert. Alright. If we're doing this, come out already. A grin appeared on his face. If I'm late, the old geezer will kill me. He slammed his palm into the ground. Boom! The desert exploded outward as dozens of massive creatures burst from beneath the sand, roaring furiously as they surrounded him. Zeon continued controlling his sand awakening power, as mana flowed into his eyes. Good. You listened well. With a flick of his finger, he commanded the surrounding sand to erupt. The sand burst upward like countless spears, impaling every end nearby. Their agonized screeches echoed through the sandstorm as their bodies were torn apart. Standing firmly on his feet, Zeon looked around confidently. Days with sandstorms are really nice, he muttered. There's sand everywhere, no matter where you look. Then he noticed Deoden had already gone far ahead. What? Zeon shouted angrily. Where did that old geezer go? Hey, old geezer! How could you play dirty and leave me behind? He clicked his tongue in annoyance. I've never seen a guy with so little camaraderie. No wonder you're still wandering around alone at your age. Unbeknownst to him, one surviving ant quietly followed him through the sandstorm. As Zeon ran to catch up with Deoden, a thought suddenly crossed his mind. Don't tell me. He heard that, right? His eyes widened in fear. If you heard that, I'm sorry. Despite his panic, Zeon's 10-meter detection zone remained active. He never let his guard down, constantly monitoring his surroundings. Whenever a monster entered his range, he could react immediately. However, what he sensed this time was different. It wasn't simply a monster. It was pure terror. Suddenly, countless giant ants burst from beneath the sand and charged toward him. Zeon instantly slipped aside, narrowly avoiding their attack. This is crazy, he shouted. Just how many of them are there? Where did this massive army come from? He glanced toward Deoden in the distance. The old man sat calmly on top of a massive cliff with his arms folded, silently watching him. Realizing no one was coming to save him, Zeon turned back toward the endless swarm. No. He clenched his teeth as he gathered enormous amounts of sand around himself. How long am I going to act like a kid and keep calling for the old geezer? As hundreds of ants leaped toward him, Zeon twisted the surrounding sand into countless sharp sand spikes that shot upward. There's no way the old geezer failed to detect these things. A confident grin spread across his face. Which means this is the quest the old geezer gave me. He charged straight toward the swarm. You damn bugs! Whether there are 1,000 or 10,000 of you, bugs are still just bugs. With a powerful wave of his hand, thousands of sand spikes rained down upon the ant army. Each spike pierced multiple ants, crushing and impaling them as Zeon continuously poured mana into controlling every attack. Then, without warning, a gigantic ant lunged from behind and clamped its massive jaws around his neck. Zeon's eyes widened. He instantly jumped backward just before the jaws crushed him. Flipping through the air, he shouted, "Damn it! I take it back, just how many of these bastards are there? Ganging up on me like cowards! Don't you guys have any conscience? Fight me one-on-one like a man!" Still upside down in midair, Zeon suddenly noticed even more ants leaping high above him, completely surrounding him. Damn! The entire swarm attacked at once. Boom! A massive explosion shook the battlefield as sand erupted into the sky, covering everything in a giant cloud. At the last second, Zeon created a floating platform of compressed sand and launched himself into the air, barely escaping the blast. He landed on the flying platform, breathing heavily. Blood trickled down his forehead and into his eyes. Looking down at the countless ants below, fear crept across his face. Crazy. This whole place is one giant ant nest. He looked toward the sky. I need to escape upward first and assess the situation. Fortunately, these guys can't fight in the... Suddenly, his body jerked violently. What? An ant had grabbed his leg. Still standing on his floating sand platform, Zeon stared in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me, no way. This shouldn't be possible. He looked downward. The entire ant colony had linked themselves together, forming a towering living pillar that stretched high into the air. The ants pulled on his leg with overwhelming force. Zeon was slammed into the ground. The combined strength of the entire colony dragged him into the sand. Blood burst from his mouth as he screamed in pain. Groaning, he struggled to push himself up with one arm. Bruised and bleeding, he instinctively looked toward Deoden, hoping the old man would finally help him. But Deoden remained exactly where he was. Sitting calmly atop the cliff with his arms folded, he silently watched the battle unfold. Seeing that, Zeon gritted his teeth in frustration and anger. As Zeon spotted the old Deoden geezer, a smirk spread across his blood-stained face. A massive ant still clung to his back, while blood trickled from the wounds across his face. Gritting his teeth, he muttered, "You'd better keep watching. Watch how I survive this." The old man remained seated at the edge of the cliff as the raging sandstorm battered the rocky ledge. Hearing Zeon's words, he let out a faint chuckle. Yeah. That's the spirit, idiot. He narrowed his eyes and continued. In a world that has turned into a desert, your ability is a blessing unlike any other. You could have used that power to live a comfortable life, free from envy or hardship. His expression grew colder. But that's where it would have ended. Those narrow-minded fools don't even know why the world became like this. They cling to empty illusions instead of facing reality. The old man fixed his sharp gaze on Zeon. An awakener's strength is power itself. And there's nothing people desire more than a power like yours. His voice echoed through the roaring sandstorm. You want to become strong? You want to survive? If you've managed to survive this far as a weak man, then it's time to survive as an awakener. A faint smile appeared on his face. Now, let's see if you can make it to the very end in this crazy world. Deoden recalled the past and muttered. Because there's nothing more damn awful than that. The tragedy from 100 years ago is remembered as a single ray of light that bursts forth in an instant. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Watching your loved ones being torn apart right before your eyes, that memory is etched deep into your bones. Even now, that moment remains as vivid as ever. That is the fate of those who survive. Survival means carrying those memories forever and constantly walking the thin line between life and death. A faint smirk appeared on Deoden's face as he looked at Zeon. That's right. You can't afford to lose to a mere monster like this. Meanwhile, Zeon used his awakened power to create multiple high-pressure compressed sand missiles. They floated around him, spinning at incredible speed. Filled with rage, Zeon shouted. Can't you all feel it too? You're all finished. The ants trembled in fear as they sensed the overwhelming power radiating from him. While controlling the high-pressure compressed sand missiles, Zeon muttered. It's the simplest, and the crudest technique. He launched one of the sand missiles toward the ant army. But if I compress it with gravity, wind, and every ounce of energy I can control. The missile struck the swarm, triggering a massive explosion that sent a devastating shockwave across the battlefield. Countless ants were blown away in an instant. Zeon smirked, spread both arms wide in excitement, and declared, "Its power has increased dozens of times over. This is the end for all of you." One after another, he launched the remaining sand missiles while skillfully controlling them with both hands. "Before I become even stronger, you'll regret not killing me when you had the chance." From the edge of the cliff, Deoden watched the battle unfold. Sitting calmly with his arms folded, he smirked and said, "Heh, the punk's getting all fired up." Zeon lowered one arm and rested the other across it, breathing heavily after exhausting a tremendous amount of mana. Even then, the remaining compressed sand missiles continued to orbit around him. Ahead of him, the battlefield had been completely devastated. Deep craters covered the ground where his sand missiles had struck, and not a single ant remained in sight. Clenching his fist in excitement, Zeon grinned. "I did it!" He turned toward Deoden and shouted, "Old geezer! Did you see that? I'm going to wipe out every last one of these." Before he could finish, a giant ant's tail, ending in a massive maw, shot out without warning. It wrapped around his body and hurled him forward. Zeon's eyes widened in horror. Gritting his teeth, he looked behind him in disbelief. "How? I didn't sense its presence at all." The giant ant tightened its grip, crushing him mercilessly. Sharp fangs tore into his arms, drawing blood. His face twisted in pain as he struggled to think. "Cloaking? No. There's no way these things can use such a high-level cloaking ability." His body suddenly felt sluggish. "If that's the case, then this is poison?" The ant's tail continued to squeeze him relentlessly. "No wonder. I haven't been able to control my mana properly for a while now. Is this a poison that blocks my mana channels?" Filled with rage, Zeon roared. "You damn bastard! You think you can take me down with something like this?" Gathering the last of his strength, he tore himself free from the ant's grasp. He crashed onto the ground, his vision becoming blurry. "Damn it!" Looking around with fading consciousness, he muttered. "Where am I? Those damn ants. Is this their nest?" A faint movement caught his attention. "Larvae!" The larvae crawled toward him and latched onto his bleeding arm. Their tiny jaws sank into his flesh as they greedily sucked his blood. "My body won't move." His breathing became weaker. "At this rate, I'll be eaten alive." His eyelids slowly began to close, yet his thoughts continued racing. So, this is the end. More larvae crawled toward him from every direction. With the last of his strength, Zeon slammed his fist into the ground. The nearby ants immediately turned toward the sound. Forcing himself onto his feet while the larvae continued clinging to his body, Zeon let out a bitter laugh. "Shit. Even with my life flashing before my eyes, I can't remember a single good memory." His expression hardened with fury. "I'm so damn pissed. I refuse to die like this. You damn ants." At that moment, a new mark appeared on his arm. His awakened power evolved to an entirely new level. A massive torrent of sand erupted from the surface above, crashing into the underground nest like a raging flood. The entire ant colony sensed the overwhelming surge of power. Panic spread through the swarm as countless ants tried to flee in terror. The underground tunnels began collapsing one after another. Standing amid the destruction, Zeon drew in the endless sea of sand surrounding him and once again created a new barrage of high-pressure compressed sand missiles. Zeon stared at his arms and muttered. "My rank went up. The poison is gone, and my stamina and mana are overflowing. Did I evolve? My power and mana are on a completely different level compared to when I was in F rank." Even so. Suddenly, a massive figure appeared before him. Zeon's eyes snapped toward it. The Ant Queen stood there, radiating pure rage. Not a single scratch marked its body. Without hesitation, the Ant Queen lunged forward. Its attack smashed through the tunnel, crushing solid bedrock as if it were nothing. Zeon leaped into the air, flipping backward to evade the devastating blow. While still airborne, he gritted his teeth and thrust both hands forward, firing a barrage of sand bullets. "You crazy bastard! You're smashing through bedrock like it's nothing. Just how strong are you?" The sand bullets slammed into the Ant Queen. When Zeon landed, he slid across the ground before stopping himself with one hand pressed against the sand. His eyes widened. "Insane. Not even a scratch? It's completely out of its mind." His heart sank as he stared at the monster. "I can't win like this. No matter how many times I attack, I won't leave a single mark on that thing." He took a deep breath. "In that case, I need another strategy." Raising both hands, Zeon focused his mana on the ground beneath the Ant Queen. A way to defeat unbreakable armor without breaking it. The sand beneath the monster began to rise, wrapping around its enormous body. "If I can't break its armor." The sand tightened around the Ant Queen like countless chains. "I'll twist that armor and rip it off completely." Pouring all of his newly evolved mana into his ability, Zeon forced the sand to bind the Ant Queen, refusing to let it move even an inch. But suddenly, the Ant Queen opened its jaws. A terrifying field force gathered inside its mouth. Still struggling to tear away its armor, Zeon poured even more mana into the surrounding sand. "You crazy monster! What the hell is that now?" An overwhelming vibration erupted from the Ant Queen. Blood trickled from Zeon's ears as the invisible waves struck him. What is this? His eyes widened in horror. Low frequency. No. It's high frequency. At this rate, my brain is going to explode. The Ant Queen continued releasing the deafening high-frequency field force, shaking the entire cavern. Even as blood streamed from his ears and eyes, Zeon refused to release his grip on the sand. Using every last drop of strength, he roared. You damn bastard! You were hiding something like this until the very end? His vision blurred as blood ran down his face. Still standing, still holding the sand together with every ounce of his will, Zeon gritted his teeth and muttered. Fine. Let's do this, you damn bastard! Zeon clenched his fists as he controlled the sand wrapped around the Ant Queen's neck, forcing it to twist with all his remaining strength. Let's see who dies first, he shouted. Me or you? The sand tightened even further, grinding against the Ant Queen's armored neck. Let's find out. Blood streamed from Zeon's eyes as he poured every last drop of mana into his sand manipulation. His hands trembled violently. Until one of us dies. Let's go, you bastard! With one final roar, Zeon unleashed all of his remaining mana. The sand twisted with overwhelming force. Then, his mana ran dry. Every ounce of strength left his body. Blood covered his face as his vision blurred. This damn body. His knees gave out. I'm too weak. Everything went black. Just before he hit the ground, a hand caught him. You're so damn weak, an old voice said with a smirk. Anyway, your mouth will twist if you fall asleep here, you idiot. It was Deoden. Zeon looked at him and managed a faint smile. I'll leave the last hit to you. Deoden laughed. What an insolent brat. He glanced at the motionless Ant Queen before looking back at Zeon. Still, you're not completely useless. That Ant Queen is a C-rank monster, far stronger than you. Even so, you struggled until the very end and refused to give up, even in the face of death. A small smile appeared on the old man's face. You've earned the right to live. Zeon let out a weak laugh and slowly closed his eyes. I can't hear a single word you're saying. My eardrums are completely ruptured. Huh? Your eardrums are ruptured? Deoden replied before grabbing Zeon by the back of his shirt and dragging him along. Hey, old geezer, Zeon asked weakly as they moved forward. Where are we going? The tunnel rumbled violently as chunks of rock crashed from the ceiling. It was beginning to collapse. Ahead of them, an unusual object lay on the ground. As they approached it, Zeon narrowed his eyes. What's this now? He pointed toward it. Old geezer, what is that? Deoden knelt beside the object and, instead of speaking, wrote something in the sand with his finger. Zeon looked down at the words. Queen Nancy 66. Deoden stood up and grinned. I'm feeding this to you. It's medicine. Strawberry flavor. Zeon stared at the word. Medicine, it's medicine, he muttered. A puzzled expression crossed his face. What is this? Is he telling me to eat it? He wondered. Still eyeing the strange object, Zeon hesitated. Is this even edible? Looking back at Deoden, he asked nervously. Just to be sure, it won't hurt after I eat it like the sand angler's gallbladder, right? Deoden glanced at him and replied calmly. You'll probably die if you eat that. However, Zeon's hearing was still impaired, so he couldn't hear a single word Deoden had said. Whatever he's saying, it's medicine, so I should eat it, Zeon thought. Without another moment of hesitation, he opened his mouth and swallowed the object. I don't know what strawberry flavor means, but the moment he tasted it, his eyes lit up. What is this? It's so damn good, Zeon exclaimed happily. Looking at Deoden with excitement, he asked, Do you have another one? Suddenly, Zeon froze. His eyes widened in shock as his entire body went stiff. With a trembling voice, he called out, Old geezer, what is this? Blood began streaming from Zeon's eyes and mouth as unbearable pain surged through his body. It felt as though his internal organs were twisting and tearing themselves apart. Huanjiang, literally meaning the twisting and turning of the intestines. The queen ant's egg was a lethal poison. Even consuming a tiny amount would cause every internal organ in the human body to twist violently. It was as if the victim's organs were pierced by countless thorns and turned inside out, forcing them to suffer the agony of Huanjiang until death. Zeon screamed in excruciating pain, clutching his face as blood poured from his eyes. What the hell? What did you make me eat? He shouted. Meanwhile, Deoden simply stuck a finger in his ear and muttered. Damn, you're incredibly loud. If you want to survive in this crazy world, you'd better get used to pain. How the hell am I supposed to get used to this? Zeon cried. A moment later, his mouth filled with blood. He coughed violently, spitting a large mouthful onto the ground. Staring at the pool of blood beneath him, a bitter thought crossed his mind. This damned life. I finally thought I could trust someone. In the end, I was just a dumbass, wasn't I? Old geezer. His strength gave out, and he collapsed into the spreading pool of his own blood. Deoden simply turned around and walked away without even looking back at him. Deoden walked over to the queen ant's massive corpse and knelt beside it. Now then, let's see, he muttered. He reached into the monster's body, searching through its organs. After a few moments, his hand stopped as he found what he was looking for. Slowly, he pulled it out. A brilliant mana crystal rested in his palm. A smirk spread across Deodan's face. Just as I expected. A monster's mana crystal is on a completely different level from the ones I produce myself. This is a real jackpot. He placed his sword on the ground beside him and looked back at the queen ant's corpse. Since this giant ant is still useful, I'll take everything for now. He tossed the mana crystal into his storage portal before storing the queen ant's body as well. Just then, his sword spoke to him through their mental connection. Deodan looked at the blade with a faint smile. Yeah. I know. His gaze shifted toward Zeon, who lay unconscious in a pool of blood, his body covered in wounds. But it can't be helped. If he's too weak to survive, then that's simply his fate. With those words, Deodan picked up his sword, slung it over his shoulder, and started walking away. His sword spoke to him once more through their mental link. Deodan paused for a moment before replying. You know it too. We don't have much time. Suddenly Zeon stirred. He slowly opened his eyes while lying in the pool of his own blood. Noticing this, Deodan smiled. You're awake, idiot. Without saying a word, Zeon gathered a massive amount of sand around himself. The sand surged into the air, creating a cloud of dust. Deodan brushed the dust from his clothes and frowned. What a disrespectful brat. What are you doing, kicking up all this dust, you punk? In an instant, dozens of sand mana missiles formed around Zeon. The swirling sand wrapped around his arms as he continuously poured mana into it, shaping one projectile after another until they floated around him, all aimed directly at Deodan. Looking at him, Deodan raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Zeon glared at him with burning rage, every sand missile locked onto its target. Seeing Zeon preparing to attack, Deodan sighed in disbelief. He's actually serious. What an idiot. All of the sand missiles shot toward Deodan, but he remained standing calmly in the same spot, his eyes fixed on Zeon. The barrage struck him, triggering a massive explosion that engulfed the area. On the other side, Zeon hovered in the air as streams of sand wrapped around his arms, supporting his body. Through his connection with the surrounding sand, he continued to manipulate it, forming even more layers that surged toward Deodan. Why? Zeon shouted. Why did you try to kill me? The sand attacked from every direction, covering the entire tunnel as it rushed toward Deodan. I won't forgive you! Zeon roared. Mana surged violently around his body as he raised his hand. This time, he commanded the sand to slice through the massive stalactites hanging from the tunnel ceiling. One after another, the towering stone formations were cut apart before crashing down on Deodan. Breathing heavily from the enormous amount of mana he had consumed, Zeon glared at him. So, why did you try to kill? Before he could finish, Deodan let out a sigh. You idiot, what are you doing? Zeon's eyes widened in surprise. As the dust settled, Deodan was still standing there with his arms folded. Not even the gigantic falling rocks had left a single scratch on him. I know the queen ant's egg contains components that mess with your brain, Deodan said with a tired expression. But couldn't you think for even a second? Zeon's heart skipped a beat. What the? He thought in disbelief. He just stood there and took all of my attacks, without a single scratch. Still wearing the same lazy expression, Deodan sighed again. Idiot. Why would I go out of my way to poison someone who died from a single flick to the forehead? Zeon's anger faded as he awkwardly placed a hand on his chest. I guess that makes sense. Deodan continued. The queen ant's egg is a lethal poison that twists your insides. But at the same time, it purges the impurities hidden within your body. Depending on how it's used, it can either be a deadly poison or a heavenly medicine. He looked directly at Zeon. Once those impurities are removed, mana naturally fills the empty space they leave behind. You felt it while you were attacking me, didn't you? Zeon fell silent. After a moment, he clenched his fist and carefully sensed the mana flowing through his body. His eyes widened. His mana had increased dramatically. Deodan nodded. Your mana has increased 3, maybe even 4 times over. Zeon looked at Deodan, and all of his anger instantly disappeared. I'm sorry for doubting you, he shouted as he ran over and wrapped Deodan in a tight hug. I must have lost my mind for a second. To think I actually doubted you, you old geezer. Deodan sighed. Yeah, you huge idiot. I get it. Now get off me. I hate being hugged by another man. With tears streaming down his face, Zeon gritted his teeth and cried. I hate it too. But come to think of it, I can hear again. It had a healing effect too. Deodan looked at him and smiled faintly. Idiot. A grown man crying like this. Let go already. No, Zeon replied. I haven't even thanked you properly yet. At that moment, the sword hanging on Deodan's back spoke to him through their mental connection. I know, my friend, Deodan answered silently. The truth is, he really could have died. He only survived because he was strong enough. Still hugging Deodan, Zeon thought to himself, even though I almost died, this should be enough for him to forgive me, right? Deodan quietly clenched his fist. If he doesn't become stronger soon, he'll be useless. I made a reckless gamble. He then grabbed Zeon with one arm and smiled. All right, idiot. Shall we get going now? Don't forgive me, idiot, Deoden thought to himself. Zeon looked confused. Old geezer. Why are you carrying me again? Deoden grinned and pointed toward the tunnel above them. We don't have time. Shouldn't we hurry and get out of here? Zeon's face turned pale. Oh damn, don't tell me. Far above the tunnel, 3 scorpions were quietly feeding. Without warning, an enormous burst of energy shot upward from below. Deoden, carrying Zeon under one arm, blasted straight through the tunnel at incredible speed. Laughing loudly, Deoden asked, Well, idiot? Much faster, right? Faster, my foot! Zeon yelled. You bastard! Can't we travel normally for once? Deoden laughed. Who told you to sleep for 4 whole days? You're so weak. How are you ever going to get married? Suddenly, Deoden's expression became serious. Wait. What is that? Still hanging from Deoden's arm, Zeon sighed. What is it now? At this point, I wouldn't be surprised by anything anymore. Then Zeon heard it too. He froze as terror spread across his face. Deoden leaped high into the air. From above, Zeon stared into the distance with wide eyes. This is insane. What the hell is that? It's almost 30 kilometers away. How can a monster be that massive? The two landed on the sand once more. Deoden folded his arms. They really won't give us a moment to rest. What is it? Zeon asked. It's the mobile fortress. Archilon. Archilon? Deoden nodded. Archilon is a turtle-type B-rank monster. But its defensive power surpasses even that of most A-rank monsters. People modify its shell, tame it, and use it as a mobile fortress. Zeon's mouth fell open. They ride that gigantic monster? Yeah, Deoden replied calmly. Take a good look, idiot. See how vast this world really is. Zeon continued staring in complete amazement. Deoden looked up at the colossal creature with his arms folded. And understand this, there are monsters, and people, strong enough to ride a beast like that. Burn that sight into your memory. The enormous monster slowly turned its gaze toward the two of them. Then, a lone figure leaped down from its back. He landed gracefully on the sand in front of Deoden and Zeon. Well, the man said with a faint smile. I wasn't sure from that distance, but it really is you. What the? Zeon exclaimed. Without taking his eyes off the newcomer, Deoden spoke quietly. Idiot. Stay still. The man calmly folded his arms behind his back. Wearing a monocle over one eye, he looked directly at Deoden. It's been a long time. Deoden. Deoden teasingly waved his fingers and laughed. It's been a while. Looks like you've lost even more teeth, Pavilsa. Pavilsa sighed in annoyance. Good grief. You're the abnormal one. You're well over 100 years old, yet you're still so spry. Deoden smirked. Anyway, what brings you here? This isn't your territory. Pavilsa replied. There's been an infestation of scavengers. Deoden scoffed. Running away from mere scavengers? You've grown old for nothing. Pavilsa calmly answered. It's called being wise, unlike an ignorant brute like you. As they continued arguing, Zeon listened with disbelief. Wait. Isn't it normal to grow weaker as you get older? Why are these old geezers so freakishly strong? He wondered. Pavilsa then placed 2 fingers in his mouth and let out a loud whistle. Moments later, a gigantic turtle emerged from behind him. Forget it, Pavilsa said to Deoden. What's the point of arguing with you? The enormous turtle slowly moved forward. Both Deoden and Zeon stared at it in surprise. Whoa. That's insane. Zeon muttered in amazement. The giant turtle lowered itself onto the sand, causing a massive cloud of dust to rise as a thick rope ladder dropped from its shell. Zeon covered his mouth with his sleeve and coughed as the dust surrounded him. The turtle's enormous eyes suddenly locked onto Zeon. The moment he noticed its gaze, his entire body froze. I'd better stay quiet, he thought nervously. Pavilsa glanced at Zeon and asked Deoden. That's a face I haven't seen before. Is he your subordinate? Deoden grabbed Zeon by the back of his neck as usual and replied. Well, I figured I'd do the environment a favor and picked up some trash. Pavilsa chuckled as he turned toward the rope ladder. A man like you dragging someone around. The world must really be coming to an end. The 3 climbed down into the giant turtle. As they descended deeper, Zeon looked below and widened his eyes in amazement. Whoa! This is unbelievable! What kind of place is this? A massive city had been built inside the giant turtle, where countless people lived peacefully. While continuing down the stairs, Deoden folded his arms and asked. So, this is the Moat clan? Hearing that, Zeon turned around and asked. A clan? You mean they're all blood relatives? Yeah, Deoden replied. They're all descendants of Pavilsa. A bunch of fools who think they're the chosen ones. In reality, they can't do anything without Archilon. Pavilsa cleared his throat and said. What do you know about our clan to run your mouth like that? Deoden proudly answered. I know enough. They're nothing but dead weight. Once you die, Archilon will abandon every last one of them. Isn't that right? Pavilsa remained silent for a moment before replying. We can discuss that later. After a while, they arrived at Pavilsa's room. Deodan casually sat down in a chair. Pavilsa looked at him and asked, "Right, shall we examine the goods first?" "Be my guest," Deodan replied as he calmly opened his subspace inventory. In an instant, countless items poured out onto the floor. Zeon stared at the mountain of loot in shock. "Whoa. This is insane. What is all this? Just how many people have you killed?" Deodan smirked. "You'll be added to that count soon." Curious, Zeon looked at him again. "By the way, old geezer, I've been wondering since the beginning. Are you some kind of magic user? Where are you pulling all this stuff from?" "Huh?" Deodan frowned. "You don't even know what a subspace is?" He burst into laughter. "I can't believe I've been dragging around such a complete idiot." Embarrassed and irritated, Zeon's face turned red. Meanwhile, Pavilsa quietly continued inspecting the items Deodan had taken out of his subspace. Zeon shouted in frustration. "Would it kill you to just explain it to me?" Deodan narrowed his eyes. "Oh? You've got the nerve to talk back to me now, you little punk?" Pavilsa picked up one of the items and carefully examined it. "Impressive, as always," he said. "Every single piece is a flawless top-grade item." Deodan looked at him and replied, "Enough with the flattery. How much are you going to pay me for it?" Pavilsa smiled. "Should I pay you in mana crystals?" The moment he heard that, Deodan immediately reached for the hilt of his sword as if he were about to put everything back into his subspace. Now, Pavilsa quickly said, raising his hands. "It was just a joke. Calm down. You really have no sense of humor." Then he asked, "Since mana crystals aren't of much use to you, what is it that you want?" After smacking Zeon on the head while the boy was holding a cup of hot water, Deodan answered, "A breastplate forged from the corpse of the wolf and queen." He set the cup down and added, "And a subspace item as well." Pavilsa looked at him curiously. "What would you need a breastplate for? Besides, you already have more than enough subspace storage." Deodan scratched his ear with his little finger before grabbing Zeon by the back of his collar. "Not for me," he said. "This idiot is going to use them." Still dangling from Deodan's grip with his cup of hot water in hand, Zeon blinked in confusion. Pavilsa stared at the boy in surprise. To think Deodan would actually care about someone else. This kid must be quite valuable to him, he thought. Pavilsa then called out, "Kaylee!" The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the room. Both Deodan and Zeon turned their heads toward the entrance. A moment later, a young woman stepped inside. Zeon's eyes widened, and his cheeks flushed slightly. "Wow! She's beautiful," he thought. Kaylee was a graceful and slender young woman with an elegant appearance. She bowed respectfully before Pavilsa. "You called for me, Grandpa?" Pavilsa nodded. "Do you still have that subspace bracelet you crafted before?" Kaylee thought for a moment before replying. "I no longer have the bracelet, but I do have a gauntlet. The enchantment turned out exceptionally well, so I've kept it stored away safely." Pavilsa smiled. "Then bring that gauntlet and give it to this boy." Kaylee's eyes widened in disbelief. "Excuse me? That precious gauntlet?" Deodan looked at Kaylee with a teasing smile and chuckled. "So, that little girl became an enchanter, huh?" Startled by his sudden remark, Kaylee greeted him nervously. "Hello? You're still looking as spry as ever." With a smirk, Deodan replied, "An enchanter is a rare profession, even in Neo Soul. As expected of Pavilsa's granddaughter, you've acquired quite a remarkable ability." Kaylee scratched her cheek awkwardly. "Ah, yes. I suppose so." Pavilsa stepped in front of Kaylee and waved his hand. "It must be uncomfortable for you. Go on ahead and tell Noel to craft a breastplate." Kaylee nodded lazily before waving at Zeon. "Understood. Hey, you! Follow me. I'll give you the gauntlet." Zeon obediently followed behind her. "Yes, ma'am. Right behind you." As they walked away, Deodan and Pavilsa silently watched Zeon, puzzled by his unusually obedient behavior. While walking through the streets, Kaylee suddenly turned around and asked, What's your relationship with that monster?" Zeon looked confused. "Monster? Oh, you mean the old geezer? I just happened to run into him by chance, and ever since then he's been dragging me around." Kaylee's eyes widened in shock. "What? By chance? And you're still alive after being dragged around by that monster?" Seeing her reaction, Zeon thought to himself, I get it now. She's just like me." He imagined Deodan effortlessly tearing monsters apart with his bare hands and instantly understood why Kaylee was so terrified. "She's definitely got PTSD." Kaylee sighed before continuing. "Well, anyway, be careful. That thing is a monster wearing human skin." Zeon gave a tired smile. "I know that all too well." A few moments later, they arrived at their destination. "Is this it?" Zeon asked. Kaylee's face lit up with excitement. "Yep. My workshop." As she opened the door, she grinned proudly. "Try not to be too surprised, okay? You're about to see something you've never seen before." The moment Zeon stepped inside, His jaw dropped. This is... The workshop was packed from wall to wall with countless weapons and equipment. Are all of these items? Kaylee laughed proudly. That's right. I personally crafted every single one of them. Well, except for the ones that came from dungeons. These are all absolute masterpieces. She lovingly picked up the gauntlet and continued. See this? It's the perfect combination of an ironclad starfish frame and adamantium. Not only does it contain subspace storage, but it also has an automatic self-repair function. It's a masterpiece among masterpieces. Zeon's eyes sparkled. Auto-repair? You mean it can fix itself? Exactly, Kaylee replied proudly. It also has a fire attribute. Depending on what kind of fire-attributed item you insert into it, this gauntlet can become an unimaginable monster. Zeon smiled brightly. Is it really okay for me to have something this valuable? Kaylee hesitated for a moment. Well, Grandpa told me to give it to you. Oh, and remember this, you can only insert an item into it once. Once it's inside, you can never remove it, so choose carefully. Zeon reached for the gauntlet with an excited grin. I'll remember that. I'll gladly accept it. However, as he grabbed it, Kaylee refused to let go. Zeon pulled harder. Kaylee still wouldn't release it. Finally, Zeon used even more strength to pry it from her hands. I can't give it to you, Kaylee cried. I won't. I can't hand my precious child over to some nobody like you. Still struggling to take it away, Zeon shouted. Then what the heck do you expect me to do? With one final tug, Zeon successfully snatched the gauntlet away. Holding it triumphantly, he laughed. Sorry, but it's mine now. The child you've raised with so much love now belongs to me. The very next moment, crack. The entire workshop suddenly shook violently. The walls trembled as a loud shattering sound echoed throughout the area. Both Zeon and Kaylee froze. Looking at her nervously, Zeon asked, Should I give it back? Kaylee slowly shook her head, her expression turning serious. No, that's not it. She clenched her teeth as another violent tremor shook the workshop. This cry from Archilan. Her eyes widened. It's them. The ground shook once again, even more violently than before. Zeon looked at her in confusion. Who are they? Kaylee stared upward, her face filled with tension. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Deoden and Pavilsa had also sensed the disturbance. Pavilsa narrowed his eyes and muttered. How persistent. He let out a sigh before saying, Those scavenger bastards. While walking behind the hurrying Kaylee, Zeon asked. Scavengers? Without slowing down, Kaylee replied. Yeah. They're an infamous group that's been rapidly expanding their power lately. Zeon frowned and asked. What kind of people are they? It's the Black Shark clan, Kaylee answered. Their leader is a D-rank awakener and a complete lunatic. Every one of his core members is also an awakened scavenger. The more she explained, the angrier she became. They don't just loot people. They're bloodthirsty psychopaths who kill without a second thought. The two soon arrived at a massive gate. As Kaylee reached out to open it, Zeon, still following behind her, asked in disbelief. Even though he's only a D-rank? Kaylee ignored his question. She pushed the gate open and called out anxiously. Grandfather! Those people are. Before she could finish, Pavilsa, who was already standing inside, calmly replied. I've already seen them. Kaylee quickly asked. Should we move, Archilan? Pavilsa slowly shook his head. Even if we do, they'll catch up to us in no time. His hand trembled slightly as he clenched his fist. Now is the time to stand and fight. Understood. Kaylee replied immediately. I'll gather all the combat personnel right away. Suddenly, another voice interrupted. No. It was Deoden. Still sitting comfortably with a cup of hot tea in his hand. He set it firmly on the table before saying, Not you guys. We'll handle it. Kaylee looked at him in shock. Huh? What? Deoden pointed at Zeon and shouted. Hey, idiot! From behind, Zeon immediately protested. I'm a private dumbass! Ignoring the complaint, Deoden smirked. You're handling this one. Zeon's eyes widened in disbelief. Huh? Me? Yeah, you punk! Deoden shouted. You got a treasure from me, so you'd better earn it. Now pay me back, what? Zeon exclaimed. How am I supposed to beat a D-rank awakener? Deoden looked at him without a hint of sympathy. So what? Zeon fell silent for a moment. Deoden looked at him and asked with a smirk. What? Are you scared? Those simple words struck Zeon right where it hurt. Before he knew it, he had already accepted the challenge. A short while later, he landed in the middle of the desert, ready to face the enemy. Clicking his tongue, he gritted his teeth in frustration. Damn it! I can't believe I fell for such a cheap taunt. He let out a quiet sigh. That old man isn't just powerful. He's as sharp as a blade. He knew exactly how to push my buttons. Taking a deep breath, Zeon forced himself to calm down. Phew. Calm down. I don't have time to dwell on this. Closing his eyes, he focused his mind as the surrounding sand slowly began to respond to his will, swirling around him. They'll be here in about 5 minutes. Need to figure out a way to defeat an awakener. As Zeon slipped on his newly acquired gauntlets, and continued thinking who's ranked higher than me before they arrive. He concentrated. The surrounding sand slowly began to swirl around him, responding to his will. Meanwhile, from atop the giant turtle, Pavilsa watched him quietly before turning to Deoden. Is this really going to be okay? Deoden looked at him and asked. What do you mean? Pavilsa replied. I'm asking if it's really alright to leave that kid out there all by himself. I heard he's only an E rank. Deoden answered without the slightest hesitation. If he loses, he dies. That's all there is to it. Pavilsa let out a quiet sigh. You're as extreme as ever. Even so, he couldn't help but worry. Even a tiger cub can be mauled to death by a dog while it's still young. However, if that cub survives and bears its fangs, it will one day grow into a fearsome predator. Suddenly, Pavilsa called out from atop the giant turtle. Hey kid! Zeon immediately looked up. Keep this one thing in mind! Pavilsa's words struck Zeon deeply. Although the story didn't reveal exactly what he said, those words ignited a fierce determination within Zeon. His expression hardened as he clenched his fists tightly, his anger and resolve burning stronger than ever. On the other side, riding his camel, one of the scavengers, Mashimoto, said to his captain, Gawain, we finally caught up. Nearby, the scavenger girl Clay called out, Captain Gawain. Should I have them pick out the useful ones to sell off? The captain sat silently on his camel, arms folded, for a moment. Then, focusing his awakening power, his eyes began to glow with red mana that also flowed around his hands. Filled with anger, he replied, No! Hack off their limbs and toss them as turtle feed. Hearing that, Clay and Mashimoto rode forward on their camels, drawing on their own awakening powers. They withdrew their blades and commanded the other scavengers, Let's go! Carve the name of the Black Shark clan into their souls. It's festival time. All the scavengers raised their blades and charged toward the giant turtle, riding their camels at full speed. Suddenly, the feet of Captain Gawain's camel sank into the sand. Even as the sand sucked the camel deeper, Gawain was shocked and began to fall with it. He leapt higher onto the camel in an attempt to save himself, but the entire animal was swallowed by the sand as if the ground itself were devouring it. Captain Gawain's eyes widened in shock as he muttered, What is that? The same realization struck the other scavengers as the sand split apart, pulling them and their camels under. Captain Gawain shouted at the sight, Retreat! Retreat! But it was too late. The sand continued to split and drag every scavenger beneath the surface. Still shocked and disbelieving, Captain Gawain muttered as he landed on the sand moved. Worried, Clay quickly ran up behind the captain and asked, Captain, are you okay? Gawain turned to her with fear in his voice. Clay, did these bastards set a trap? No, she replied. There were absolutely no traps. Without either of them noticing, the sand behind Clay slowly began to rise. It was Zeon, who had been hiding within the sand. He quickly seized Clay from behind and locked her in place. Zeon stared at her with one eye, radiating a horrifying, murderous aura. Clay's eyes widened in terror as she muttered, What the? When did he? Seeing this, the captain in front of them shouted in rage, You bastard! Take your hands off her right now. But Zeon simply used his sand manipulation power. Sand burst into Clay's body, flooding her mouth and striking her stomach. Blood sprayed everywhere. Even the captain stared in horror as the blood spread before him. Captain Gawain's movements froze at the terrible scene. After killing her, Zeon released her body. Blood covered the ground in front of him and even stained his face. He wiped it away with his hand and, filled with killing intent, said only one word, Next. At that moment, Mashimoto gripped his blade, red aura flaring along its edge, and moved to sneak attack Zeon from behind. He swung and released a wave of red aura toward Zeon. Zeon stood calmly without turning. The red aura slash cut through everything in its path, and Mashimoto believed he had struck his target. Then, in disbelief, he thought, What the hell is with this guy? Zeon still stood in place. Sand that had covered him now cleared away, leaving Mashimoto unable to understand how Zeon had dodged, or blocked, the slash. Mashimoto prepared to attack again, leaping high toward Zeon from behind with his blade ready. Suddenly Captain Gawain, seeing everything, shouted a warning, Mashimoto! Below you! Beneath Mashimoto the sand twisted into a sharp, spear-like edge. Mashimoto quickly shifted his attention and shattered the sand formation. Captain Gawain joined the fight as well, moving behind Zeon and gathering air pressure into his fist while roaring, You bastard! What kind of cheap trick? He drove his fist forward. A massive burst of sand erupted in front of Zeon, a sand barrier that absorbed the blow. Captain Gawain stared in shock. What is this? Sand? Veins of mana raced along his arms as the pressure in his fist increased. What kind of petty tricks have you been pulling this whole time? You think this pathetic crap His red awakening aura finally shattered the sand barrier as he shouted in fury, "Is enough to stop me?" In that instant Zeon vanished. Captain Gawain turned to Mashimoto. "It looks like he's manipulating something. Pincer attack." Suddenly he froze. Blood was dripping from Mashimoto. Zeon had already seized him by the neck, forced sand into his throat, and driven a blade into his stomach. After finishing the kill, Zeon turned toward Captain Gawain and locked eyes with him, radiating pure murderous intent. In that moment Zeon remembered the words Pavilsa had spoken to him earlier. "Hey kid! Keep this one thing in mind." Zeon had asked, "What is it?" Pavilsa answered, "You're probably more worried about having to kill another human than you are about facing a D rank. But keep this in mind, those bastards aren't human." Zeon had stared in disbelief. "They're not human?" "That's right," Pavilsa replied. "Those guys enjoy killing people. They torture and massacre people for no reason. They take pride in violating women and butchering children. The number of people who have fallen victim to them has to be over 200. Do you think bastards like that can be human?" Back in the present, a pool of blood spread across the ground, soaking Zeon's feet. Without a second glance, he casually flung Mashimoto's lifeless body aside and fixed his cold gaze on Gawain. The moment Gawain saw his teammate lying dead, he clenched his fists. A crimson aura erupted around his body as his eyes glowed with uncontrollable rage. "You damn bastard! I'll kill you!" he roared. Before Gawain could make a move, dozens of sand mana missiles gathered around Zeon, ready to strike. But Gawain simply thrust both hands forward. A massive aura barrier burst outward, instantly shattering every sand missile into dust. "Pulling cheap tricks until the very end!" he shouted furiously. Staring at Zeon with murderous intent, Gawain sneered. "Do you really think you can defeat me with this pathetic bullshit, you piece of trash? I won't let you die so easily! I'll carve you up piece by piece, starting with your fingertips, then throw what's left of you to the monsters. They'll slowly devour you while your family's screams echo in your ears. You'll beg me to kill you!" Before Gawain could say another word, Zeon calmly raised the blade in his hand and asked in a cold, emotionless voice, "Hey, are those your last words?" Hearing those words only fueled Gawain's fury. The veins on his forehead bulged as bloodlust overflowed from his body. His burning eyes locked onto Zeon. Watching the battle from atop the giant turtle, Deodan wore a faint smirk. He was thoroughly enjoying the fight, impressed by how well Zeon was holding his own. Meanwhile, Zeon tightened his grip on his sword. His newly forged gauntlet gleamed as he firmly grasped the hilt. With an icy expression, he looked straight at Gawain and spoke. "You piece of trash." Captain Gawain of the Scavengers let out a mocking laugh. "Calling me trash?" His smile slowly faded as his eyes drifted toward the lifeless bodies of Clay and Mashimoto. Sadness briefly flashed across his face. They were people I acknowledged. They weren't supposed to lose to some half-baked amateur. His gaze returned to Zeon, filled with confusion. Just what is this guy? What kind of ability is he using? Meanwhile, sand began swirling around Zeon. The grains gathered from every direction, enveloping him as his eyes glowed with a golden light. With a wave of his hand, he manipulated the sand into the form of a massive dragon. Gawain froze for a brief moment. Then, crimson aura erupted from his fists once again. Every vein in his arms bulged as he poured more aura into his body, dramatically increasing his strength. "I have no intention of playing along with your tricks," he shouted with murderous intent. "Why don't you stop hiding behind that sand and show me your real ability? If you're truly an awakener, face me!" In response, Zeon formed countless razor-sharp sand spears and launched them straight at Gawain. "Stop hiding and fight me head-on!" Gawain roared. As the sand spears closed in, Gawain gathered all of his crimson aura into his fists. Slamming both fists together, he unleashed a massive crimson shockwave that obliterated every spear before it could reach him. Lowering his hands, he smirked. "What's next?" Suddenly, something felt wrong. Zeon had vanished. Only drifting sand remained where he had been standing. Where is he? A split second later, a blade swung toward Gawain's neck from behind. The sword shattered into countless fragments the instant it touched Gawain's neck. It was Zeon. His surprise attack had failed. He predicted my attack? No. This is... Gawain slowly turned his head, his bloodshot eyes burning with rage. "You finally entered my range. I was lured in." Before Zeon could retreat, Gawain grabbed him by the throat and slammed him violently into the sand. "To think a non-martial awakener would close the distance so easily." Zeon gritted his teeth in disbelief. "Damn it!" Gawain tightened his grip even further. His crimson aura flared wildly as murderous intent filled the air. "You don't understand at all," he roared. "A single mistake in battle means death." Zeon struggled desperately to break free. To think it was all a trap. A bloodthirsty grin spread across Gawain's face. "I'll carve this lesson into your body, one strike at a time. This is for Mashimoto." He gathered enormous aura into his fist before driving a devastating punch into Zeon. Boom! The impact shook the entire battlefield as a violent shockwave erupted in every direction. Zeon was buried deep into the sand. Without stopping, Gawain continued raining down punches, each one stronger than the last. This is for Clay. This is for Elia. For Ezreal. For Merrick's. For Shivaris. For Carol. With every punch, Gawain shouted the name of another fallen subordinate. Zeon could barely react. Blood covered his face as tears formed in his eyes from the unbearable pain. Still, Gawain showed no mercy. Whatever your ability is, he growled, it means absolutely nothing now that I've caught you. Curse your own weakness, and die. Suddenly, shadow-like hands wrapped tightly around Gawain's fist. His eyes widened in shock. What? I definitely had him. Although Zeon's face was buried in the sand, he had secretly manipulated the surrounding sand to form powerful hands that restrained Gawain. Did he remove his gauntlet just to escape? Before Gawain could understand what had happened, Zeon created dozens of sand mana missiles. They fired all at once. Boom! 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 The relentless barrage forced Gawain backward as he desperately shielded himself with his arms. You damn rat! Zeon emerged from the sand and continuously moved his hand, commanding wave after wave of missiles. He gave Gawain no chance to recover. Blood trickled from Gawain's mouth. I let him escape because I panicked. What a stupid mistake. But his attacks are noticeably weaker than before. The momentum is gone. The amplification must have come from that gauntlet. He's a wind attribute awakener, one of the rarest among magic types. Did he combine physical force with his sand? Immediately, Gawain poured crimson aura into the veins of his legs before launching himself high into the air. I've completely figured out your tricks, he shouted. Now that you've lost your gauntlet, you can't produce the same power as before. A mere magic-type awakener without an amplifier could never defeat a martial-type fighter in close combat. Blood streamed down Zeon's face as he silently stared at Gawain. Then, a faint smirk appeared. He had been waiting for this exact moment. With a subtle movement of his hand, Zeon caused the sand behind Gawain to explode upward. Razor-sharp sand spikes burst from the ground. Thrust! One of them pierced straight through Gawain's back while he was still in midair. His eyes widened in disbelief. He aimed for my back. Still smiling, Zeon slowly raised his hand. Damn, old man. You finally let your guard down. Gawain trembled as the massive sand spear pinned him in place. You bastard. You used the exact same trick again? Then realization struck him. His eyes filled with horror. Wait, he doesn't even have his gauntlet anymore. For a magic-type awakener of a different attribute to generate this much force without an artifact. That's impossible, this guy. Don't tell me. Falling to one knee, Zeon thrust his hand into the sand. With another gesture, he forced the enormous spear even deeper into Gawain's chest. Blood burst from Gawain's mouth. His vision blurred. No. It can't be. A power that manipulates sand. A power capable of controlling the battlefield itself. Can such an ability really exist? Without saying a word, Zeon continued manipulating the sand. Gigantic sand hands rose from the earth, wrapping themselves around Gawain's body. A colossal wave of sand surged upward, swallowing him whole. Within moments, half of Gawain's body had disappeared beneath the crushing sea of sand. His fate was sealed. Meanwhile, the moment Pavilsa realized that Zeon could manipulate sand itself, he froze in shock. His eyes remained fixed on Zeon as countless thoughts raced through his mind. Doesn't that mean the entire battlefield is both his weapon and his shield? I can hardly believe it, even after witnessing it with my own eyes. On top of that, Gawain is a scavenger with countless battles under his belt. If Zeon had confronted him head-on, his life would have been in grave danger. Instead, this kid exploited the unpredictable nature of his ability, deliberately luring his opponent into lowering his guard while patiently waiting for the perfect opening. That kind of judgment usually takes years of battlefield experience to develop. Yet he grasped it instinctively, and he accomplished all of that in the middle of a life-and-death battle. Pavilsa let out a slow breath, unable to hide his amazement. To think, I took him for nothing more than a tiger cub. He slowly shook his head. I was wrong. Turning toward Deodan, Pavilsa stared at him with disbelief before asking, where on earth did you find a monster like that? After the life-and-death battle, Zeon stood trembling, clutching his injured arm. Blood continued to drip down his face as he struggled to remain on his feet. Taking a shaky breath, he muttered, that was way too close. If I had taken even one more solid hit, I would have been a goner. He wiped the blood from his face and let out a weak laugh. Still, you'd think that old geezer would at least praise me for pulling something like that off. Suddenly, a tremendous shockwave sliced past Zeon. Boom! His eyes widened in shock as the ground beside him split apart. The sea of sand was cleaved cleanly in two, the massive slash stretching far into the distance. Zeon stared at the destruction, unable to comprehend what had just happened. It was Deodan, standing atop the giant turtle, He slowly lowered the sword he had just swung and pointed it directly at Zeon. You halfwit, he said coldly. You're planning to come back after doing such a sloppy job? Zeon looked at him in disbelief. Wait, old geezer. At least give me a reason. What did I do wrong this time? Daoden's expression darkened as he clenched his teeth. The one you left alive? Zeon blinked in confusion. What? Don't tell me you didn't even notice. Daoden continued. The swordsman you spared was already preparing to ambush you. Did you honestly not expect something like that? Realization struck Zeon. That's... Before he could explain, Daoden cut him off. How long are you going to remain so complacent? Turning his back, Daoden began walking away. Go back. With that kind of mindset, you'll be dead before long. His cold words echoed across the silent battlefield. Pavilsa quietly observed the exchange without interrupting. Beside him, Kaylee lowered her head sadly, feeling sorry for Zeon. Even the spirit within Daoden's sword seemed unusually silent. Zeon remained frozen, the old man's words repeating endlessly in his mind. Go back. With that kind of mindset, you'll be dead before long. Then, footsteps slowly approached him. Still lost in thought, Zeon suddenly heard a gentle voice. Thank you? He slowly raised his head. Standing before him were Pavilsa and Kaylee. Pavilsa stepped forward and smiled warmly. The people of Archilan are all non-combatants, he said. The Moat clan has never had any talent for fighting. We're blacksmiths. Even if we tried to resist the scavengers, all we could do was swing our hammers. He looked around at the battlefield before turning back to Zeon. If it weren't for you, I can't even imagine how many people would have died today. He bowed his head sincerely. Thank you. You truly did a great job. Zeon was silent for a moment before replying quietly. I see. Before he could say anything else, Kaylee suddenly rushed toward him and wrapped him in a hug, pulling his head against her chest. That's right, she said cheerfully. You were amazing. You fought the entire Black Shark squad all by yourself. She pouted. Don't let that monster of an old geezer get to you. His standards have always been ridiculously high. Even when I made my very first dagger as a kid. Before she could finish, Zeon gently lowered his eyes. No. His voice became heavy. I knew that if Mashimoto survived, he could come back and ambush me, and yet... I still couldn't kill him. I pretended not to notice. I was probably hoping he wouldn't get back up, that he'd simply disappear on his own. Even though I knew they were evil. Even though I had convinced myself they deserved to die, I just didn't have the courage to face death head-on. He clenched his trembling fist. I simply didn't want to carry the guilt of taking someone's life, for such a cowardly reason. He let out a bitter smile. The old geezer was right. He's probably watched countless people like me die first, so that was probably his own way of looking out for me. He just didn't want to see me throw my life away. After a brief silence, Zeon smiled faintly. He's just terrible at showing it, that old geezer Daoden. Pavilsa and Kaylee exchanged surprised glances. Then Pavilsa burst into laughter. I've never heard anyone talk about Daoden like that. Kaylee quickly hid behind Pavilsa and whispered nervously. Did he hit his head or something? Pavilsa smiled gently, hesitating to kill in a life-and-death battle. I suppose it really weighed on him. Accepting something like that at his age couldn't have been easy. The only thing I regret is that a child had to carry such a burden because of us foolish adults. Shaking those thoughts away, Pavilsa smiled. Now then, come inside. At the very least, have a proper meal. He looked at Zeon with a kind smile. And you, kid, go take a bath. Zeon nodded respectfully. Yes, sir. A few hours later, Daoden sat quietly in his room, calmly reading a book. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. He ignored it. The knocking continued, growing louder and more persistent, yet Daoden didn't respond. Bang! The door suddenly burst open as Zeon smashed it with a punch. Daoden! Why are you pretending not to be here when you clearly are? Zeon shouted angrily. Daoden sighed in annoyance, closed his book, and looked at him. You ill-mannered brat, he said. So, our little coward, are you here to tell me you're going home? Zeon frowned. What's with that tone? I think you're seriously underestimating me, old geezer. He pointed at himself with confidence. Let me be clear. I won't be broken by something like that. Daoden remained seated on the couch, silently observing him. His eyes drifted towards Zeon's trembling hands. Your hands are still shaking, he said calmly. Zeon looked down nervously. This is... Before he could finish, Daoden took a sip of water and replied. That is only natural. In fact, it would be strange if you were perfectly fine. He looked directly into Zeon's eyes. Killing someone is never easy. It means ending another person's life. That guilt will follow you for the rest of your life. He paused for a moment before continuing. So don't try to forget it, and don't force yourself to become numb to it. The moment you stop feeling guilty entirely, you'll become no different from the scum you killed. His voice remained calm but firm. Remember this. The fact that you're suffering is proof that you're still human. After a brief silence, he added, if you can't endure it, you can still go back now. Bang! Zeon slammed his fist onto the table. Didn't I just tell you? He shouted with a confident smirk. I won't be broken. Something like this is nothing to me. I'll take good care of myself, so stop worrying. Then he smiled warmly. Besides, he struck his fist against his chest with determination. How could I leave such a stubborn old man all alone? I'd better stick around so you don't end up dying a lonely death. Deoden stared at him in silence, momentarily speechless. A faint smile appeared on his face. You cheeky little punk. Zeon grinned. You like having me around because I keep things lively, don't you? You just can't be honest with yourself. Deoden's fist tightened. What did you just say? Zeon continued without fear. Even if I'm a cheeky brat, who else is going to clean up your corpse when you die? Wait. Use your words. Words. The sound of a powerful punch echoed throughout the room. The scene shifted to the blacksmith's workshop. The rhythmic sound of hammers striking glowing metal echoed endlessly. Blacksmiths worked tirelessly, forging and refining the blazing sword with incredible precision. Every craftsman focused entirely on their task, pouring all of their strength and skill into the masterpiece. Kaylee walked beside Pavilsa, looking around in amazement. My goodness! I've never seen this many master blacksmiths gathered in one place before. Pavilsa nodded. That's only natural. They're currently calming Deoden's sword. Kaylee widened her eyes. But it's already been several days. How can a single sword still release this much power? Pavilsa answered calmly. This sword, Cryan, is a masterpiece born from one man's obsession. That is all I'll say. Kaylee stared at the sword in disbelief. I've never seen anything like it before. It's hard to believe a human could create something like this. Pavilsa continued. It has countless enchantments layered upon it, to the point where no further modifications are possible. It also contains the cores and souls of millions of monsters. He looked toward the sword. To be honest, it feels less like a weapon and more like a living creature. Kaylee swallowed nervously. Who in the world created such a sword? It was made by a human, right? Cryan. Pavilsa replied. Cryan. Does that mean the sword and the swordsmith share the same name? Just think of it as a masterpiece worthy of its creator. Kaylee hesitated before asking. Then, that swordsmith is Kaylee. Pavilsa interrupted her. Those two will be leaving soon. We'll talk about it later. Kaylee blinked. Huh? Zeon's leaving already? The two soon arrived outside Deoden's room. Pavilsa instinctively raised an arm to stop Kaylee. Deoden isn't the type to stay in one place for long, he said. He's probably already packed and ready to leave. As much as I'd hate to see him go. He opened the door and froze. What kind of nonsense is this now, Deoden? Inside the room, Zeon was buried face first in the floor after being punched into the ground. Meanwhile, Deoden sat calmly in his chair as if nothing had happened. Education, he replied without changing his expression. Pavilsa sighed. Don't talk rubbish. After leaving the giant turtle's dwelling, Zeon suddenly spotted 4 figures in the distance. Each of them carried a bow across their back as they sprinted toward him and Deoden. His eyes widened in disbelief. Elves, he muttered. A look of excitement spread across his face. So they're real. It's my first time seeing elves. Standing atop the massive cliff beside Deoden, Zeon looked down at the approaching demi-humans. Wow! Old geezer, this is my first time seeing demi-humans. Meanwhile, the elves raced toward the cliff. One of the elven girls pointed at Zeon and Deoden. Look over there! Humans! Relief filled her face. Thank goodness! We can use them as monster bait. That should distract it. Zeon blinked in confusion. Bait? They're going to use us as bait? He scratched the back of his head with a disappointed sigh. And people say elves are a noble race. Kaylee is way better. In the blink of an eye, the elves reached the top of the cliff. They're already up here? Zeon exclaimed in surprise. The elves stood there, breathing heavily after climbing the towering cliff. One of the elven women immediately drew her bow and aimed an arrow directly at Zeon and Deoden. Move, humans! She pointed toward the edge of the cliff. Get down there and lure the monster away! Right now! The other elves also drew their weapons, glaring at the two humans with hostile expressions. Zeon let out an exhausted sigh. Excuse me, aren't you guys much faster than us? Couldn't you just keep running? Why are you telling us to? Before he could finish his sentence, his body froze. An indescribable aura washed over the area. It was so overwhelming that every muscle in his body refused to move. For a split second, Zeon thought a terrifying monster had appeared. The elves standing before him seemed to feel the exact same pressure. But then he realized something. Despite facing countless monsters and powerful awakeners, this feeling was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was pure terror, a primal instinct that screamed only one thing. Run. Almost instinctively, Zeon searched for the source of that terrifying presence. Slowly, he turned around. His eyes landed on the person standing quietly beside him. Why am I looking at my own companion instead of the armed demi-humans? Or the monster chasing them? Why can't I bring myself to run? Would struggling even mean anything? It didn't take him long to understand. The source of that horrifying pressure was Deoden. Dark crimson aura erupted from his body, violently shaking the surrounding air. The ground trembled beneath his feet. His glowing crimson eyes burned with murderous rage, while the darkness surrounding him seemed to freeze the very atmosphere itself. His gaze never left the elves. On the other side, the elven warriors trembled uncontrollably. One of the elven girls felt her entire body go numb. How could something like this exist? Another elf bit her lower lip as cold sweat poured down her face. Snap out of it. He's just a human. Yet Deoden's killing intent crushed them without mercy. Several elves collapsed onto their knees, unable to withstand the overwhelming pressure. Only the elf who had aimed the arrow managed to remain standing. She looked at her kneeling comrades in disbelief. What are you doing? You're kneeling before a human? She gritted her teeth and poured every ounce of mana into her arrow. We have to kill him. A human like this should never exist. With a sharp cry, she released the arrow. It shot toward Deoden at incredible speed, wrapped in icy mana. Old geezer! Zeon shouted as he instinctively gathered sand around himself. Are you crazy? The frozen arrow streaked through the air. Without taking a single step, Deoden calmly caught it with one hand. His expression never changed. His crimson eyes remained fixed on the elves, burning with endless fury. The elf who had fired the arrow immediately turned toward the others. Get up! Sobalan! Hurry! Take your combat stance! We have to kill that human before she could finish. Deoden spoke in a cold, emotionless voice. How did you survive? In the next instant, he appeared directly in front of her. His hand clamped over her face, completely covering her mouth. With effortless strength, he lifted her into the air as though she weighed nothing. Sobalan! Naalka! The remaining elves cried out in panic. Jihora! Deoden's grip tightened. Still staring at her with murderous eyes, he asked. I thought I killed every last one of you decades ago. His voice grew colder. So, where were you hiding? Seeing Jihora in danger, Sobalan quickly drew her bow and aimed another arrow at Deoden. Shut your mouth, human! She shouted. Let Jihora go right now! Naalka, despite trembling with fear, gripped her dagger tightly. How dare a mere human lay a hand on an elf? Deoden ignored them completely. His grip around Jihora's face only tightened. The pressure became unbearable as her face turned bright red. Tears streamed down her cheeks while she struggled desperately to breathe. Without changing his expression, Deoden spoke. I'll ask you one more time. His crimson eyes glared into hers. How did all of you survive? Answer me. The remaining elves trembled even as they kept their weapons raised. Suddenly, Deoden roared, his voice filled with rage and frustration. I asked you, who did you sacrifice this time, to stay alive? His hand clenched shut. Jihora's head was crushed instantly, exploding like a ripe tomato. Blood splattered across the ground. Her lifeless body fell from his grasp. The remaining elves froze in horror. Jihora! Why? They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Without another word, Deoden lifted 1 foot high into the air. A terrifying pressure gathered beneath it. He stomped onto the massive cliff. The entire mountain shook violently before shattering into countless pieces. Everyone was thrown into the air as the cliff collapsed beneath them. While falling, the elves still shouted proudly. We don't care how many humans die for our sake. Human lives are worth less than insects. Humans deserve to die, not elves. Deoden folded his arms as he calmly fell through the collapsing rocks. It's because of bastards like you that this world ended up like this. And yet you still refuse to change. Nearby, Zeon clung to a large piece of rock as he fell, his eyes filled with confusion. Old geezer, what is he talking about? The world became like this because of the demi-humans. At that very moment, the monster chasing the elves finally appeared. Its enormous body towered over everything below. Its glowing eyes locked onto the elves while overwhelming mana leaked from every inch of its body. Zeon's pupils shrank. What is that monster? One of the elves cried out in panic. Solkaras! The monster let out a deafening roar. One of the elves quickly shouted. Perfect! Let that monster and the human kill each other! Another elf immediately gave an order. Ikara! Throw the smaller human toward the monster first. Zeon's face paled. Wait, what are you people talking about? The elf continued. In the meantime, Naalka and I will corner the human who killed Jihora and... She never finished her sentence. Slash. Her body split cleanly into two, blood burst into the air. As consciousness faded, only one thought remained in her mind. The world, why is it split in half? It wasn't the world. It was Deoden. With a single swing of his gigantic blade, he unleashed an overwhelming shockwave that sliced both the elf and the gigantic monster cleanly in half. The force of the attack blasted through the battlefield. A violent shockwave scattered the sand, hurled boulders into the air, and threw both Zeon and the remaining elves backward. One of the surviving elves struggled to stay on her feet. "Sobalon! Can you hear me, if you're alive? Answer me." Before she could finish, a hand suddenly covered her mouth. Deodan stood directly behind her. His eyes burned with murderous intent. "Your village is nearby, isn't it?" The elf desperately struggled as tears poured from her eyes. "I'll let you go, if you answer me." She glared at him despite her fear. For a mere human. Before she could finish speaking, Deodan slammed her head into the ground with overwhelming force. The impact created a massive crater. Blood exploded across the sand. She died instantly. Silence fell over the battlefield. Only one elf remained. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. "Don't come near me! Go away! I said go away!" Behind Deodan, Zeon hurried after him. "Old geezer! Wait a minute!" As soon as Zeon came close, without even looking back, Deodan threw a single punch behind him. The shockwave alone sent Zeon flying through the air. He crashed into a gigantic boulder, shattering it into countless pieces. Without sparing him another glance, Deodan continued walking toward the last elf. He looked down at her trembling body. "You're shaking. In front of a human, how pitiful." A cold smile spread across his face. "I'd like you to tell me where your village is." The elf collapsed onto the ground, unable to stop trembling. It's an elven village. Why would a human want to know?" Before she could finish, she met Deodan's crimson eyes. Those blood-red eyes were filled with nothing but endless hatred and bloodlust. Her entire body froze. She couldn't even breathe. Slowly, Deodan stepped closer. With a chilling smile, he whispered, "Thank you?" The elf immediately burst into tears. Please spare me, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please let me live." Deodan remained completely silent. Without another word, he rested his gigantic blade across his shoulder. Then, he leapt into the air with explosive force and shot toward the elven village at terrifying speed, leaving a massive trail carved through the land behind him. The elf watched him disappear. He's heading for the village." Relief spread across her face. "I survived." Her head slid silently from her shoulders and fell onto the ground. On the other side of the battlefield, Zeon slowly regained consciousness among the shattered rocks. Blood trickled down his forehead as he painfully forced himself to stand. His entire body shook. "That crazy old geezer, if it weren't for my chest plate, 4 of my ribs would have been shattered." Then his eyes fell upon the bodies of the dead elves. He froze. "Old geezer, why did you have to go this far?" Ahead of him stretched a massive scar across the land, the path Deodan had carved while charging toward the elven village. Zeon gritted his teeth. He remembered Deodan's words. "I thought I killed every last one of you decades ago. Where were you hiding?" Zeon couldn't understand what those words meant. But one thing was certain. Something terrible had happened long before he was born. Without another moment of hesitation, Zeon dashed forward at full speed, following the path Deodan had left behind. "Where on earth are you going, old geezer?" After following Deodan's trail, Zeon finally arrived at the elves' village. He was breathing heavily after running at full speed, but it seemed he had already arrived too late. Before him, the entire village was engulfed in flames. Thick black smoke covered the sky, and the once peaceful settlement had become a sea of fire. Zeon's eyes widened in shock as he stared at the horrifying sight. The village was burning. Every elf had been slaughtered. There wasn't a single sign of life left. Disappointment and guilt filled his heart. "I rushed here as fast as I could. Was I still too late?" Suddenly, he noticed a severed hand lying on the ground, still gripping a sword. Blood dripped from the blade, painting the earth crimson. Zeon froze, unable to process the massacre before him. Then he heard a faint voice. His expression immediately changed as he turned toward the sound. Without hesitation, he sprinted through the burning village, passing countless bodies of fallen elves. "Someone's alive! There might still be survivors!" Pushing his senses to their limit, he searched desperately. "I can barely feel their presence. Is it 1 person? 2? I can't tell. But they're close. Not far from here." He ran even faster. "Not yet. It's not too late. If I can reach them in time." Before he could finish his thoughts, a terrified voice echoed through the air. "Please spare me. I won't do anything." A spray of blood burst into the air. Zeon came to an abrupt stop. Right before his eyes, Deodan swung his blade in a single clean strike, beheading the last survivor. Rage exploded inside Zeon. He stared at Deodan's back in disbelief. He actually did it. That old geezer. Unable to contain his anger any longer, Zeon unleashed a massive wave of sand. The ground erupted beneath him, forming towering walls of sand that surrounded Deodan from every direction. Landing on top of the sand wall, Zeon shouted furiously. Why did you have to go this far? Deodan slowly narrowed his eyes before looking back at him. I was wondering who it was. Without another word, Zeon commanded the massive walls of sand to collapse toward Deodan from every direction. Deodan remained calm. Are you trying to play the hero? Dark aura erupted from his body. The overwhelming pressure instantly shattered Zeon's sand into countless fragments. Still standing atop the collapsing sand, Zeon struggled to maintain control, but Deodan's aura completely overwhelmed him. The giant sand wall crumbled beneath Zeon's feet, sending him crashing to the ground. Deodan didn't give him a moment to recover. Leaping high into the air, he descended with incredible speed. His blade aimed directly at Zeon. Zeon quickly raised a sand barrier around himself, softening the impact as he landed. But in the next instant, Deodan crashed down onto the barrier, driving Zeon deep into the sand with tremendous force. Even then, Zeon refused to give up. While pinned beneath the attack, he continued controlling the surrounding sand, sending wave after wave toward Deodan while pouring his mana into the assault. Deodan stood completely unfazed. Good grief. He stepped onto Zeon's back and slammed his face into the sand. You're not a hero. You're just an unruly colt. Blood trickled from Zeon's mouth, but he forced himself to speak. I kept thinking about it on the way here. I don't really know why the world ended up like this, or why you're so full of hatred. I thought interfering would only make things worse. Deodan looked at him with curiosity. And? Zeon looked up with sorrow in his eyes. If it was about revenge, I could at least understand that. But killing even those who surrendered, those who had no will to fight. Before he could finish, Deodan pressed his foot down even harder. A sickening pressure crushed Zeon's back. Zeon screamed as blood spilled from his mouth. Deodan glared at him with burning anger. You use the word understand far too easily. Were those scavengers you encountered in Archilon the ones who murdered your family? Who was it that went on a rampage after being given permission to slaughter? The pressure beneath Deodan's foot continued to increase. Through the pain, Zeon gritted his teeth. I never thought of it as permission. Deodan continued. The 4 elves we first met didn't become like that overnight. And those 4 are no different from the rest. Some kill humans reluctantly. Others do it willingly. Not for pleasure. Not because of religion. They kill purely for selfish reasons, convincing themselves that humans are meant to be the victims. That's how they avoid despair over their own miserable lives. Still struggling beneath Deodan's foot, Zeon asked. Is that really? Deodan slammed him back into the sand. You're from Neon Soul. Your ideals might still survive there. It's the only place where the compassion you speak of is tolerated, because dead slaves can't produce power for the city. Despite the pain, Zeon continued trying to push himself up. His fists trembled with anger. Deodan raised his voice. But this place is a battlefield. A world where only the strong survive. Before preaching about humanity, look at where you're standing. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then Zeon slowly lifted his head. I've seen the world before, and after it changed. Even so, I still refuse to believe that one person's will is powerless. Deodan removed his foot from Zeon's back. He gripped his sword and began walking away. Without turning around, he spoke one final time. This is the path I chose. Zeon remained sitting on the ground, silently watching his back. Deodan continued walking forward. Do you still think you'll be able to say those words, once you've witnessed everything I've seen? Zeon, exhausted from the battle, looked at Deodan with curiosity. What is it that I don't know? He asked. Without turning around, Deodan replied. Everything. You're young and naive enough to mistake recklessness for justice. You know nothing about the lives they've lived. He fell silent for a moment. Zeon finally broke the silence. You were the one who told me never to give up, old geezer. With a serious expression, he continued. I too will walk my own path. Even if I come to witness the same things you have, even then. Hearing those words, Deodan slowly turned his head toward Zeon. Zeon met his gaze with unwavering determination. I will never give up. Deodan silently studied him, taking his confidence and resolve seriously. For a brief moment, he seemed lost in thought. Then he reached into his belongings and tossed a bundle of clothes toward Zeon. You should take a look around the village. Zeon caught the bundle and frowned. Clothes? Where did these come from? Deodan resumed walking without looking back. Who knows? You'll find out when you return to Archilon. He casually waved his hand before continuing on his way, saying nothing more. Left alone, Zeon slowly stood up and looked around the devastated village. The village is small, but there aren't any general stores or restaurants in sight. It's entirely residential. As he walked through the ruined settlement, his curiosity only grew. We didn't find any other settlements on the way here. They couldn't have divided necessities like food, clothing, and shelter among different villages. A village isn't just a place to sleep. There's something different about this place. As he continued searching, he came across several wooden boxes scattered among the bodies. Inside them were numerous strange ornaments. Jewelry? He picked one up for a closer look. No. It's similar, but not quite. I've never seen craftsmanship like this before. Not in Neon Soul, not in the mines, and not even in Archilon. Turning the object over in his hand, he frowned. It doesn't seem to have been made by humans. Even the texture feels strange. Like something created more than 100 years ago. I was always told that the demi-humans appeared 100 years ago, when the Earth began turning into a desert. Could all of this really have come into existence in only a century? Nearby, Zeon noticed a large notice board covered in writing. He stepped closer. I've never seen this language before. I can't even tell which direction it's supposed to be read. As he placed his hand on the weathered board, countless thoughts raced through his mind. I never really questioned where monsters and demi-humans came from. They already existed before I was born. But what if they didn't simply appear? What if they had existed long before then? Suddenly, Daoden's earlier words echoed in his mind. Not for pleasure. Not because of religion. They killed others purely for selfish reasons, convincing themselves that humans were meant to be the victims. That way, they wouldn't have to despair over their own circumstances. Returning to the present, Zeon clenched his fists. It doesn't look like they came to Earth willingly. What if someone brought them here? If such a being truly exists, then this entire world. Unable to finish the thought, Zeon walked toward the fallen elf into the jewelry box, then using his sand manipulation, he carefully absorbed them into the earth, giving him a proper burial. Afterward, he fully opened one of the ornament boxes. The moment he looked inside, his expression froze. He slowly closed his eyes and gritted his teeth in anger. The box didn't contain elven belongings. It was filled with human possessions. Clothes. Jewelry. Personal keepsakes. Everything had belonged to humans. Realization struck him. The reason this village only needed houses was because everything else they simply stole by killing humans. Silently, Zeon's anger reached its limit. He slowly raised both hands. The sand beneath the village began to tremble. Countless grains rose into the air as he gathered every ounce of his remaining mana. Then, with a powerful surge of energy, enormous waves of sand burst across the village. Every abandoned house shattered beneath the overwhelming force. Golden sand wrapped around Zeon's arms as mana flowed through his body. He clenched his fists. With a single step, he slammed his foot into the ground. A massive shockwave erupted outward. The remaining buildings crumbled into dust, while the surrounding sand swallowed the ruins and the buried remains alike. Soon, the entire village disappeared beneath an endless sea of sand. No buildings remained, no roads. No traces of the settlement. Only silence, and the desert. Having exhausted nearly all of his mana, Zeon staggered forward. He breathed heavily as sweat poured down his face. After staring at the endless dunes for a long moment, he quietly muttered, "This is the least I can do for them."